Present.
Commissioner Lisowski.
Here.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Mobley, he's excused, he's out, and Commissioner Mayton.
Here.
Chairman Crosby.
Here. And we welcome our newest member this evening. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Chris.
Okay, we had minutes from our February 25th meeting in the packet, and staff was wanting some clarification on our motion. Was that the issue, Kelly?
Yeah.
To clarify what we said. The motion is, pull the minutes up here. It's on page 4.
Does this relate to the? Does this relate to the continued
Interpretation? No, it's not.
Well, technically,
Well-
because it's the motion we did on our code interpretation,
Right.
and
but
at the end of the staff, well, at the end of the agenda, staff says they want an interpretation of that. So if we approve it, and then we do and reinterpret it, how do you want to do that?
well, I guess.
Should we move it to the public hearing part?
Yeah, I think is that
Okay.
the
Okay.
interpretation arises from the application you're continuing tonight. So I think the best approach would be just to address that maybe first during the public hearing.
Okay.
And then we can bring the minutes back to you at the next meeting.
Oh, okay,
Isn't that
okay.
the-
Sure.
That was what I was wondering. Right at the beginning, you wrote rough draft, and I hadn't seen her before that
Oh.
expressed that way.
Yeah, it was because the new system we have, the new council and planning commission system we have, whatever you put in the title gets carried out. It's not as easy to use as the last system. So I think what happened is it was in the heading of the PDF that we uploaded, and it just got carried into it doesn't have the
Got it.
flexibility we used to have.
So now we figured it out, IT's running the city, not the council.
No, this system's running how we run meetings, yeah.
Hal. Okay, so we won't need to look at the minutes.
You can,
We'll
as long as
just-
it's okay with the commission, you can take that up at your next meeting.
Okay. Okay.
It's okay with you guys, I won't hold up Kelly.
No.
Alrighty. Okay, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is requests from the floor. This is a time when we give at each of our meetings for the public to just make some comments, to speak to the planning commission on things that are not on the agenda. We ask you, if you want to speak, for anybody to come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, I'm Karen Topworth. My address is 13015 Vegas Street, Sandy, Oregon. And I'm here because I would like the commission, and I've already talked to the council, giving them packets considering this, to consider manufactured homes on privately owned lots. It's allowed in Estacada and several other cities around the area. I've included a cover letter in the packets that I gave you. It's allowed and encouraged by state law. And in these packets, there's some examples of how other cities have written this code up. I'm kind of selfish in wanting this because a lot of my friends who have also retired and want to downsize can't afford to live in Sandy anymore, even though their parents and grandparents may have lived here, because they can't find affordable housing. So they're moving away from Sandy. I've lived in a manufactured home park before. It has tremendous drawbacks. The biggest being that you may pay for your home, but you don't own the land. At any time that the owner of that land, many of them now the state, want to sell that property and develop it, you're stuck. If you can't find another place to move the home, you basically trash it like you do a crashed car. If you do find a place to put it, it's going to cost you $20,000 or more to move that home. And so it's not advantageous for most people who are looking to get into a more reasonable priced home to go into a mobile home park. For the city standpoint, those homes pay between $300 and $400 generally in personal property tax. They use the same amount of city services as a home that's paying $3,500 a year in taxes. I know. like I said, I've lived in both situations. I would like to be able to own a home on a smaller lot that was a one-level manufactured home that me and my husband could manage at our age, the work of, and the upkeep of, and the yard work of. And so I'm asking for you to consider making that a source of affordable housing in Sandy. And as I said, in your packet, there's a complete cover letter, and there's sites of state law and other cities. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. Are there any questions?
I appreciate your packet. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing. David and I were just kind of talking for a minute there. Most our residential zones, at least 3 of the 4, allow for single-family manufactured homes on individual lots of record. They do have to meet some minimum design standards. We would have to, I think, kind of look into our R3 zone a little bit in more depth, because I don't think it really calls it out in there.
So you said we do already have some.
I believe so.
Which zones?
I have not been able to find that to be the case here. I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah, so it says in our code, we allow primary uses permitted outright, single detached manufactured dwelling, subject to design standards in Chapter 1790.
Which zone was that?
That's what it says for SFR, R1, and R2. And then I do have to admit in R3, I don't see that. It just says manufactured home parks. So I think we would have to look at it in more depth for R3, but it does appear that 3 of the residential zoning districts do allow for it. There would be some minimum standards. I think it has to be one of the newer units. It can be one of the traditional single-wide dwelling units. So there are some restrictions, don't get me wrong. It has to be placed on a foundation, taken off the wheels, those sorts of things.
Most of the cities that allow them require a foundation, require them to be double wides, not single wides, and most of them require either a carport or garage. So, that's kind of standard.
But I would love to follow up with Mrs. Topliff and send you an email, kind of saying where in the code we believe it's states that.
And if you would like, I can come back and talk to you when you have more time. I know you have a lot of pressing issues tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen. Anybody else for just general comments tonight? Okay. We have no old business. Well, no, all we have is old business. We have no new business. And our old business is to pick up the continuance on file 18-025, which we will continue right now at 7:09. And just a couple things, I don't need to read through the list, aren't you glad? But any ex parte contact to declare since the last meeting. Okay, and then we need to go on, we should ask for Chris and Ron, who weren't at that last meeting, to tell us what you've done to get up to speed on it so that you can participate tonight.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I have, I got a big bowl of popcorn and I sat down. And I did go through the 2.5 hours as best I could. You obviously lose something over it, but I definitely got the vast majority of what was going on through that. And then went through the materials, so I feel like I'm not sufficiently immersed in the subject to carry on with it tonight.
Okay.
I did too. Also watch all of the video, actually 1.5 times, just to make sure I got a good understanding of it. I reviewed the 400 pages of documents at the time when I got my email. I can't say I looked at every word, but I looked at the majority of it.
Mhm.
I went in depth with the applicant's response on April 3rd for the big issues and read through every code that it pertained to and reflected back on the 400 pages I originally had so I could bring myself to speed. And I think I did review the meeting minutes as well.
Okay. Anybody have issues with them participating tonight?
And Chair, I would just offer the public an opportunity to take any exception.
Yeah, okay. Any challenge to any of these two individual members that to participate tonight? Okay,
Thank you.
let's pick it up with a staff report. Emily?
Thanks, Bill Gates.
Minute to get that monitor back on. I think they timed out.
We've got it on ours.
Yeah, these big ones time out though. Yeah. You can just push the button just to the end of the red dot. Yeah, there you go.
I think you have to recite it to make it turn on.
There you go.
Okay.
Trying to see
I think the sleep picture.
All right, so we're here tonight for the Jacoby Heights subdivision continuance. Just a quick refresher of where we're looking at. So kind of south end of town, east of Jacoby Road, just east of the Cascadia Village, and south of Timberline Trails. This is just a zoom into the site. Kind of purple overlay there is our city FSH. Doesn't extend into this property just because it was mapped prior to this property being part of the city. But if you just kind of can imagine extending that purple line, and the applicant has mapped that, so you have it in your plan set. The red is the 25% or greater slopes, the red overlay, and then Tickle Creek is up there on the northeast corner. Quick review of the proposal. So it's 32 dwelling unit subdivision. They're requesting 3 variances we talked about last time, and then the code interpretation. This is the applicant's proposal site plan here. Just you can see the new streets, and then that area in the upper right-hand corner again is the FSH overlay. So I'm just going to cover things that are different from the previous staff report, the big issues. So the first one has already come up. So you did make that interpretation at the last meeting that the one specific subsection, namely 1792-10C, does not apply to residential subdivisions, and we're just requesting a revised motion that includes a clear basis for that decision so that we can incorporate it into the final order findings. The other things that have changed, I know this is kind of a text-heavy slide, but just wanted to get it all on there. So these are the major things that I think we'll be probably talking about tonight. So previously we had recommended that that FSH overlay area be dedicated as a tract to the city. The applicant contested that. We've revised our recommendation to have it be owned and maintained by an HOA and blanketed by a conservation easement and pedestrian easement. As was noted before, lots 19 through 21 would shrink to be less than 7,500 square feet. So we would recommend supporting a variance to allow that, and also to allow the rear setback to be 15 feet. Last time we talked a little bit about including a pedestrian connector trail from this subject property down to the future Tickle Creek Trail alignment. We're no longer requiring that with this revised staff report. Last time we had asked the applicant to identify a minimum of 10 additional retention trees due to kind of concerns of potentially retaining some trees that may have decay or otherwise be questionable, and also a bunch that were along the property line and not knowing what might happen on the adjacent property where many of the roots and canopy are. So we tried to make that a little bit more flexible. So for the ones on the property line, we just are asking to either identify an additional 6 retention trees on the subject property, or to get a recorded tree conservation easement on the property to the east, which would also be within the FSH. It should in theory be protected, although we actually just last week had another property outside of our city limits within the UGB partially clear cut, so it does happen. So just a little extra protection there. And then for the 4 trees, I had notes about decay and other issues, just to get that third-party arborist, similar to what we do with the traffic engineer. Let's see, so before we had talked about some more public works comment, providing a 3/4 street on Newton and a VNAR along the entire south side of Newton. We've since revised that to, it's still a 3/4 street, but it could be either on the subject property, or the applicant could acquire land on the property to the south to accommodate that 3/4 section if they wanted to bump, you know, to half street on their property and then get another quarter on the parcel to the south. That would work as well, as long as it's just the 3/4 street in the end. And then the VNAR would still be along the south side of Newton, but the easternmost part on the south side would not be included in that, and that's so that the existing homes to the east would still be able to, you know, use their gravel drive and then connect up to the Newton street. We've added a new condition regarding street trees to aerate the planter strips to a depth of 3 feet, just looking at the amount of grading that's going to happen on the site, and topsoil removal and compaction of the soil and all of that. I think this would be a good practice to do, to just aerate that. And it could be done either at the subdivision stage, and then it would just be fenced off so that the heavy machinery doesn't drive over it after that, or it could be aerated at the individual home construction phase. So last time, our public works director recommended or required a 48-foot cul-de-sac radius. The applicant's representatives and our public works director went back and forth on this, and kind of came to, I think, an agreement on a minimum paved cul-de-sac of 42 feet, provided it's approved by the fire department. So previously we had recommended the tree protection fencing 5 feet beyond drip line for all trees. The arborist had submitted a memo last time talking about trees 510, 516 specifically. As exceptions, those trees, the tree protection fencing would need to be within that 5 feet beyond drip line radius, and so this newer revised staff report includes that exception. And finally, so this was also back and forth between the applicant's representative and our public works director, but they kind of came up with, I think, a revised solution to the Woodstock extension. The applicant wanted a fee in lieu option, and so just like about an hour ago, I received this, so I can read it. This is our public work director's language for a revised, I guess, what's condition 30. So it states, all grading and or retaining walls on private property necessary to allow extension of Woodstock to the east boundary of the site shall be completed with the construction of public improvements prior to final plat. If and when the adjacent parcel to the east is developed, no work shall be necessary on private property, in particular lots 18 and 19, to extend Woodstock Street to the site boundary. Any work not completed, street improvements, wet and dry utilities, etc., shall be guaranteed by a fee in lieu equal to 125% of the cost of the remaining improvements. The fee in lieu shall include design survey, staking, and mobilization costs, as well as construction costs. All cost estimates shall be reviewed and approved by the city engineer. So that revised condition would be what we would now recommend, even though that's not going to be in the staff report you have currently, because we just received that. So those are the major changes. I'm just going to quickly show a few diagrams. This is our park master plan, park facility plan. So it shows the proposed, this is the whole city obviously, it shows the proposed Tickle Creek Trail, or generally off-road bike walk trails. Zooming into this property here in orange, so that symbol there is the proposed bike trail. What it doesn't show is those connector trails, which, if you recall from the last meeting, became kind of a topic of debate. So that's why we've removed the connector trail, but the Tickle Creek Trail future alignment will go in that northeast corner. So I think the applicant had proposed, so we had recommended that the FSH area be, an HOA tract, and that it have a conservation easement and a pedestrian easement. I believe in the applicant's consultant's memo, they're proposing the pedestrian easement to follow the 980-foot contour. So that is where the Tickle Creek Trail would go through. What we'd intend this to be was more, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide here, the path, that connector trail down, which we're no longer requiring on this property, but due to slopes, you just want to have that flexibility that that trail could do some switchbacks and meander into this restricted development area if it turns out that that's the best way to get down and access the site, access the trail. As you know, Tickle Creek Trail is obviously a huge asset here, so we do want the people in all these neighborhoods to be able to access it. So that purple line is the boundary that we were recommending that whole area be under the pedestrian easement as well as the conservation easement. There's another thing that popped up in the applicant's representative's memo about potentially removing trees in the FSH. That would actually be a totally separate application. That would be a type 2 FSH review. We do have a process for that, and our code does allow removal of up to 2 trees in the FSH per year, not 3. So that, again, that would be a separate application, not tonight. So just to summarize, same staff recommendation as before. So to approve the subdivision with the conditions outlined in this new revised report. To approve the 3 requested variances. I did want to note that our previous approval recommendation for the block length on the north side of Woodstock did include, that was back when there was the pedestrian connector trail, which would have effectively reduced that block length. We no longer have that, but we are still recommending approval at this point. And then to approve that additional variance to allow lots 19 through 21 to be less than 7,500 square feet and to have a 15-foot rear setback instead of the 20. That is our revised staff recommendations.
Okay, any questions right now? I'm sure we will have. Okay. With that, we'll give the applicant the opportunity.
Good evening, my name is Tracy Brown, live at 17075 Fur Drive in Sandy. So I wanted to go through recommendations in the staff report, and I did want to point out that I just received tonight this list of items that they're recommending. Over the weekend, I think Don Carlton had emailed Kelly and myself and said he'd like to see a list of recommended conditions, and so I'm just seeing this tonight. Although in looking through it, it looks like the same bullet points or bolded points that are in the staff report. So I don't know if you've all seen that or not, but it is a more of a detailed list, I believe, of all the bolded points in the staff report.
Is it just the conditions?
Yeah, recommendations and conditions.
And I think we're going to do away with doing that in the future anymore. It's
Pardon?
creating more confusion than it's worth.
Where did you get that one?
I got it on the table out there.
It's online. I mean, it's on the staff report we published online too.
Well, the one, is it different from the one from the 25th of February, or it's the same?
Probably.
No, it's different.
Oh, yeah, it's different. It's updated conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't, in my packet, I didn't get any, when I downloaded it, that's why I asked the question, because I didn't see a new list of 60 or 70 items.
I mean, they're
And
all
so I
in this-
wondered if we were just using the old one.
Yeah, they're all in the staff report.
Which page?
I couldn't find them.
Last
Show me where
one.
they
I
are.
think it's towards the end.
In the new staff report,
Right, I was looking at the new
because on
stuff.
page 62 is where the old, original ones are,
Well, we'd have to find it. Give me a second here.
I've scrolled.
unless this is the new one.
So in at the last meeting, we had gone through kind of in detail our review of each and every recommendation and condition in the list that was provided in the last staff report. And I don't think there's anything different from what was in the staff report that was issued for this meeting, but this is kind of a new list that sounds like you haven't seen, and I hadn't seen until tonight. So anyway, I'm just kind of raising that as a...
David says it starts on page...
I believe if it's the same list that you have, Tracy, I think it starts on page 5 55 of the packet that's online. So it's,
When was that added?
And it was all
Last
together.
Monday, it was all added together.
Oh, was it? Okay, that list was in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess
I'm trying to find,
565.
Yeah, 555.
I'm trying to find
Okay, anyway, it wasn't, is it separated from the staff report then? I never saw it, it's not attached to the staff report, because I went through the entire staff report to the very end.
I uploaded them together, but this new system sometimes reorders
Yeah,
things.
because I printed out the staff report and that list isn't in there.
It's a separate document, but they were next to each other in the list when I uploaded them.
Hmm. When I looked at it, I went through the whole staff report, and then the next page after the end of the staff report, which is kind of the summary recommendations, was the application. So I'm not sure where it is in there, but anyway, I'm just kind of raising that as a, you know, I don't think it is a big deal, but it's something we haven't seen, I'm not sure.
I literally copied and pasted from the report, all the bold sentences
Right,
into the new one,
right.
in the order in which they appear, and did not
Yeah.
delete duplicates or anything.
That's what
takes
it
a
looked
long
like
time.
when I went through it, so.
Well,
So
I do find it of value. I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. I mean, it may be long, but when we vote on something, I want to make sure we know what we're voting on. And sometimes I know the list is long, but
And I would just add that it's helpful for the applicant to review because it's kind of the summary of the recommendations.
Right.
Rather than just picking out bolded points out of the staff report. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. And also wanted to make sure that you received the our April 3rd memo. And there's 3 attachments to that. There was a kind of a detailed look at Woodstock Avenue. There was also the exhibit that staff showed on the screen regarding our proposed location for the tree, or not tree, but the pedestrian easement, and also kind of a detailed blow-up of Lot 19 and our proposed removal of a couple trees there. So I'll go through kind of my presentation. We also sent a couple-page document from the project arborist. He wasn't able to be here tonight, and this kind of references his credentials and his review of the project and his recommendations regarding the tree protection area. So I'll go into that a little more detail. So first of all, I guess the code interpretation you're going to be kind of looking at, I guess staff is unclear what you decided. I thought it was pretty clear that you decided that 179210C did not apply to subdivisions. So we're hoping that that is, you're reaching the same conclusion. And I think from what I heard at the last meeting, you know, we presented a lot of the legislative history of that, the adoption of that ordinance, and there was quite a bit of discussion about the confusion that arises with having 2 competing code sections, and you chose to favor 17102, which is the urban forestry section. So then I'll go through the, I guess, the big issues that were kind of included toward the end of the staff report. This was creation of a FSH tract to be owned and maintained by an HOA, homeowners association, and staff is recommending approval of some variances to some of the lot sizes, because with the creation of that tract, some of the lots will not be 7,500 square feet. So, you know, we're not in favor of this proposed condition, and primary reason is we don't think having an HOA is really the best way to maintain this area. You know, this area is going to be behind some houses, and this is not an area that will be commonly accessed or should be accessed by the general subdivision unless there's a trail that goes through a portion of that area. So from our experience, the applicant is concerned that HOAs just do not work that well in Sandy, and they cause more problems than they're worth. And this particular location and type of property doesn't really lend itself to being owned and maintained by an HOA. So we're proposing to plat lots into this fish overlay, and then in the area that's kind of determined to be the fish overlay, provide a conservation easement over that portion to ensure that it will be protected. So this is something that is allowed by the code, and I cited the code sections that allows this. We also are proposing within that area a pedestrian easement over a portion of that tract, and I think staff did a good job of showing where that is proposed at the 980 contour. And there was a exhibit in the packet that we sent you that shows where that would be. And this aligns very well with city-owned property. City-owned property abuts the northern side of this property. It's, you know, we're able to zoom out on this plan, but or this shot here, but you did see that line, that red dashed line, that dark line directly on the other side of the subdivision is city-owned property. So the city owns property abutting the northern part of this property, and this proposed pedestrian access easement would be that corner of the property, kind of aligning with the city, already the city-owned property. It makes kind of a logical extension of that area for pedestrian access for a future trail. There was also a recommendation in that condition that some variances be granted to allow these lots to be less than 7,500 square feet, and we didn't see any justification or rationale for granting these variances. And it seems kind of shooting from the hip in a sense in that regard. So with all that in mind, we're recommending or requesting that this area, that this condition be removed and replaced with a condition that would basically read, you know, plat a conservation easement over the entirety of the fish overlay and a pedestrian access easement across the northwest corner of the property at contour elevation 980. And this would provide insurance protection of this area and also future trail provide area for that. So going on to the next area, there is a big issue identified of some decorative fencing for lots or homes along Jacoby. We don't have a problem with that. We don't have a problem with the next one regarding geological assessment. The next one had to do with the design of the 3rd Street of Newton, and with the flexibility that's provided in that new condition, we don't have a problem with that. The next one had to do with identifying 6 additional trees because some of the trees are close to the property line. So at the last meeting, you may be aware that we provided an exhibit that showed where those trees were, because there was question how close to the line were they. And so we provided a blow-up of that area, showing that they are clearly on the applicant's property, except possibly tree number 3006. So staff is requesting that these trees be protected on the adjacent property in addition to on the subject property. So these trees are kind of down the hill. We can show the tree sketch, but these trees are down the hill, probably in the area of where we have the overall tree.
No.
Okay, that's fine. So these trees are further down the hill from this point.
Where's 3006?
It's quite a ways down there.
Okay.
So
It's off the chart.
Yeah, maybe I should get that out. We have an exhibit that shows all the trees. Pass those out.
Yeah, this might help. This shows the trees that are proposed to remain and their locations and numbers. Colors. Thank you, sir. Colors are good. Yeah.
I saw that report, that helped me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, the trees in question were identified as 527, 28, 30, and then you keep going north, 50, 550, and 3006. 3006 is almost way at the far north of the end of the property line. So this property, the next door property is, as staff indicated, in the county. It is down the hill from where their house is. And I guess we believe that the risk of activities occurring on that property is so slim that to identify extra trees is kind of burdensome to the property owner. We are showing, so on this sketch that Ray just handed out, the trees in green are the trees that are being counted for the meet tree protection requirement. So the code requires 29 trees, there's 33 green trees, and so in addition to that, we're including another 30 trees that are either undersized or not as in good of condition. And so there's a total of 63 trees, and I think, you know, there's been a lot of discussion when you've been talking about the code updates of creating these tree protection tracts or protection areas, kind of clusters of trees, and I think this is a good example of the way to go. I mean, these are small rows of trees that will help protect each other against adverse conditions. For the most part, there are a few isolated trees. So I think this is a good example of tree protection. And so to require additional trees above and beyond those is burdensome to the property owner or the applicant. And, you know, really there's very little risk. So there was also discussion in that condition about what is the proper tree protection zone. And the staff report had quite a bit of verbiage about what the applicant's arborist talked about, in addition to what the kind of rule of thumb and some other code. But it really comes back to what does the city's code say. And the arborist was making recommendations regarding 2 trees, 510 and 516, and really his additional written narrative really talks about, you know, he doesn't think 10 feet is the best, which is in the chapter 17-102, or the 5 feet beyond the drip line, because that, you know, in this case, it's probably not as problematic, but in a case where these trees are within houses, you could wipe out houses, and if you're wanting to protect all those trees with that great of a buffer. And so he, in his recommendations, he provided for each tree that he's recommending to be protected, a root protection zone recommendation. And so we would be willing to go with that if it's necessary, with his recommendation in the table that was provided with his report. And again, really, it's only going to come into play with those trees that are near development. The majority of trees, you could have a 100-foot root protection zone and they would be fine because they're at least 100 feet away from any proposed development. So we would recommend or prefer that the root protection zone either in chapter 17-102, which is 10 feet beyond the trunk of the tree, or that proposed by the applicant's arborist in his report be used, and not the 5 feet beyond the drip line. There was also a recommendation that the applicant should retain a third-party arborist to evaluate 4 of the trees. And these were trees that he had identified as being viable with a few qualifiers. You know, one might have some that's bowing to it or something like that. And so he provided testimony at the last hearing that, you know, those qualifiers do not compromise the integrity of the trees. And, you know, this guy has over 16 years of experience. And so, again, to require the applicant to hire another arborist to look at 4 trees, which are kind of down the hill from any development, seems to be quite burdensome. You know, he's already spent over $3,000 reviewing trees that were basically worthless work because of the way you interpreted the code that 179210 does not apply. So having, because initially he was only told he needed to inventory trees 11 inches and greater, and he had that done. And then during the application check, he was told, no, you got to now go out and inventory trees 8 inches and greater. It cost him another $3,000 to do that, and that work was unnecessary given the code interpretation. So this arborist is very experienced. He is a little nervous, and he admitted that was his first public presentation. So he's more of a field guy than a public speaker, but regardless of his presentation, his credentials and his work should stand alone on its own. So those are the big items identified by staff, the staff report. You know, and I went through and kind of circled the ones in this list that I just saw tonight that applies to, and we can kind of point those out. I won't go through those numbers right now. There's a few other conditions we wanted to just comment on. And this was, I guess, creating the separate tract and a couple of easements that were proposed in the staff report. So they're proposing a blanket conservation easement over the entire FSH overlay and a pedestrian easement. We would prefer that only the pedestrian easement be located in the northeast part of the property. And then also they're recommending an 8-foot pedestrian maintenance access easement. This was kind of a odd one, as they talked about that they aren't requiring or can't require a trail connection to a future quick trail, but they're wanting a maintenance access easement somewhere to get down to that area. And so I'd like to just point out that this area is also connected to city-owned property, as I mentioned before. And so the distance, I measured the distance, if you were to start at the street above and go down to where the trail would be, it's roughly 300 feet, kind of down a steep hill. And it's about if you were to measure from Jacoby Road and walk in, it would be a gradual walk, it would be about 600 feet to get to that same location. But my guess is, for any kind of maintenance, people would prefer doing the gradual walk rather than down a hill. So I'm not sure if that's the only intent, or it's kind of a sneaky way to get a trail connection. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna go there, but it seems like a very odd thing to have. The only other thing, there's still on number 2 on that page 4, I still believe there's a conflict in this condition that's recommending if trees aren't put in by the property owner or by the applicant, requiring this either a 2 or 3 year maintenance period. And so one place it says 2 and the other place says 3 in the same condition. So I would just suggest, I thought it seems like 2 is the the code requirement. I saw that same condition in the list also. Let's see. I talked about the tree protection area. So I'm going to have Ray just talk a little bit about lot 19 and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission. This is Ray Moore for the record, all county surveyors and planners, P.O. Box 955, Sandy, Oregon. And thank you for your time. I know it's a special meeting and you're missing the basketball game right now. I do
We recorded.
appreciate,
It's recorded.
yeah, perfect. All the effort you guys going through to be on this commission, so thank you. So real quick, we kind of had a typo on the exhibit that we sent in, or I guess it was late last week. It's the exhibit Tyler just passed out. We had a tree protection radius of, I believe, 10 feet beyond like tree 524 and 525. And so we're going with our arborist recommendations for the root protection zone for these trees. So what this exhibit is showing is based on the arborist, his recommendations spacing for the root protection. And so what we're going to do in engineering design is ensure that that toe of the slope of the new fill across 19 and 20 will catch before we're into that root protection area. So this exhibit is just sort of demonstrating that we can hit that target. Regarding staff's concern, we're also proposing to remove the 3 trees, 523, 419, and 526. 526, I believe, is a not viable tree, so it's unhealthy anyway. So we're really asking for 2 trees within FSH. If that's something that can't happen tonight, I understand there's a procedure. That's something that we could potentially pull the grade back, and if there's an issue during construction, if there's another permit process we need to go through to remove those trees, we'll request it at that time. So that's that. I do want to just hit just a couple things. I don't want to reiterate everything Tracy just said, but what I do want to say, just kind of in general, when I lay out developments, we try to make things meet the code. And when we can't meet the code, we ask for a variance. In this application, we asked for 3 variances. Block length, which we're obviously up against the FSH, steep slope, we can't meet that. The double frontage lots, which is dictated by the code. The code says we can't have access to Jacoby Road, so we have to have a parallel street. So it's sort of a variance request that we're forced into because of the code. It's a weird one. I think the code needs to be modified. And then we're requesting a variance so the front doors don't have to face Jacoby. So with that said, the site as designed meets the code. The code is very detailed when it talks about what you can and what you can't do with trees, and what you can and can't do with FSH. The code is very detailed. It says you can plat within the FSH. We're just following the code. If the code says create a tract with your FSH, I would design a subdivision that we create a tract. So again, I tried to do a good job in meeting the code, and in this case, I did. We showed some lots platting inside the FSH, and we proved a buildable pad outside of the FSH. Staff, in my opinion, doesn't have the right to deny it because we meet the code. If they would like a tract, I understand that, then the code needs to change. Say, let's do a tract, and we'll do a tract. In this case, the applicant doesn't want to do a tract. The applicant wants to meet the code. You guys are here to make sure the application meets code. It meets it. So enough said on the track and the FSH. I think we're going above and beyond. The applicant's willing to give pedestrian access easement, like Tracy pointed out, but not over the entire property. They don't need to come walking up the hillside into somebody's backyard. They can be down at the elevation, whatever it was, 590. That matches up well with the city-owned property to the north. That seems reasonable. The code also doesn't require tree protection easements over FSH overlays. I fought this battle years ago and won. There's nothing in the code that says if you have FSH property, put an easement over it. The code says if you have FSH property, the trees are protected because of the code. The code protects the trees. If you have FSH property on your, the FSH overlay on your property, it's protected. The trees are protected based on the code. The applicant's willing to grant an overlay, an easement, tree protection easement. Again, it's not required, they're willing to do that. But they're not willing to give up an easement over all of that area for pedestrians, which, you know, I don't blame them. Lastly, it's always about the trees lately, and what we've demonstrated with this exhibit that we handed out a little bit ago was, and Tracy pointed it out, the code requires us to save 29 trees. Again, try to meet the code by code requirements. All we need to save are 29 trees. We're saving 33 trees that meet the code. In addition to those 33 trees, we're saving another 30 trees. So we're saving 63 trees, and in a few years, those 30 trees are probably gonna be regulated trees. So when it's all said and done in a few years, we're gonna have 63 trees that meet the code, not 29. Again, we're going above and beyond. One thing I'm gonna hit lightly on, I'm not too hung up about it. It was a condition of approval from engineering, and it showed up as condition of approval 21. It's a mid-block ramp. Can we pull up just any one of the sheet 2 or 3 of the plans that were submitted? One more zoomed out a little better.
We don't have the capability to do that.
Okay, so if you guys want to turn to, I think sheet 3 of the engineering submittal that shows all of the site area to the west of this development. The mid-block ramp that Mike's requesting is on Woodstock, and it's basically an ADA ramp that could direct ADA people across Jacoby Road to the west. Okay, so it's a mid-block ramp. The reason I have a little bit of a heartache with it is there's about 3 reasons. But first of all, when anybody sees an ADA ramp anymore, child, young family, you know, they see this ramp, and in my opinion, it's a place for them to feel comfortable crossing. And if you drive that road and you actually take a look at it, Jacoby Road's dropping at about a 7-8% grade to the north. Woodstock tees into Jacoby Road. And so, say a kid starts out across that intersection, well, it's not even an intersection, it's like a mid-block. There's not a receiver street to the west of Woodstock. So, if they start out in that intersection, say it's an icy morning, and the car traveling 40 hits its brakes, and could slide and hit somebody crossing at that location. In my opinion, it's a bad idea. The other thing, if you could look at the big picture, which apparently we don't have a map that shows it, there's no point to cross there. There's no road going to the west at that intersection. If you want to continue west to the park, you're either gonna you have to walk north or south of Woodstock to get to a street that continues to the west. So if you're gonna want to go to the park, you have to walk north or south a half a block anyway before you can cross at a street intersection. In this case, it would be Newton Street, because there's another street going to the west of Jacoby at that location. Which I think a vehicle is a little more cautious when they're crossing an intersection rather than a mid-block. So really, there's no time savings to cross there and then walk half block north, half block south. So the city's concern is ADA. There's lawsuits, people going around suing because they don't have an ADA ramp here or there. So the question, and staff took the position that they'd rather not be sued by somebody with an ADA organization. I just, as an engineer, I just wanted to have my say, and I think that's a bad idea. I'd rather be sued by an ADA than a family that had their kid hit at that intersection. But that's my personal opinion, and I just wanted to get it out there for the record. You guys can decide, and I suppose there may be some liability because there's not an ADA ramp crossing at that location. It's the city engineer's opinion that it's needed for ADA rules and regulations, so be it. So enough said on that, that's my opinion. We can live with that condition, we worked it out. We will, you know, it doesn't meet ADA, it's 8%, but on an 8% road, there's some flexibility in design, and we can warp the landing and do some craziness, but, so I can engineer it to satisfy the city, and so therefore we can live with the condition of approval. And again, you know, Trace said, you know, this staff said that this was part of the application. I just saw it for the first time walking in the door, read through it, and maybe it's not a comprehensive list. I just want to caution you if you say, hey, let's approve this as is. If you read through it, there's several duplications. Item 25 is the same as 19, 26 is the same as 19, 30 is the same as 24. So it was put together rather quickly. So just be careful. Looks like there's a bunch of duplications. So.
Could I ask one quick question to clarify both like you and Tracy said? I just want to make sure I understand kind of one thing on this. I know you don't want to create a separate tract, okay, and you say that, but it says the applicant does not object to platting a conservation easement or the FHH overlay. I want to make sure I read that.
You did read it correctly, and like I pointed out, I think there's enough code language to protect the trees because it's an FSH, but the applicant's willing to give you a blanket easement to protect the trees.
Right,
So,
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure, Tracy kind of hit one and not the other in his, and so I just want to make sure
Sure.
that's a big one that we just kind of can clear up.
Yep. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, we'll give opportunity for public testimony if you, and I'd like to call for for the public testimony to address kind of new issues that we're talking about tonight, and not ones that we covered the last meeting, if possible. So we give opportunity for those that are in favor of it, and then those who are opposed to it, and then those who just have a comment or a question. So we'll go right to those who are in favor of the application, your proponent. Time to give your testimony, and again, to the podium, name and address. And move quickly. Okay, nothing seen. We'll go to opponent testimony. If you're not in favor of the application, would like to give some testimony. Or if you just have a question or a concern to share, now would be the time. Yes.
Ben Sparkman, 19260 Southeast Jacoby. It's the property just to the west. My question is mostly in regards to Jacoby, not Jacoby, Newton, shifting down, and that I believe is a variance or just trying to move it down and then acquiring or having the two other myself and I believe there's another property owner working with him to move the road, because I believe where Newton is currently laid out would put into the setbacks of my current house. So being able to shift that road, and the two other property owners working with this property owner would definitely save my house, or at least working with that. I don't know if I'm making a whole lot of sense on what I'm talking about, but.
So you said west, but are you west or
east,
south?
Yeah, sorry, to the east. To the east, yeah. So it's on.
Can you guys
I think it's two slides over. A couple. Yep. So the new development where it's all red and checkered. That's.
This house is over there.
Right there. Right there. That's where my house currently sits, and if it's possible to have the whole Newton be shifted down, the two other myself and then the other property owner if they wanted to. Because I'm interested in the sake of saving my house and not having to for future development. Working with this property owner to just move the whole road down instead of potentially having to do a lot more work on my development end, and even if it was pushed to have to demolish the house. It was remodeled recently. It's a nice very, very nice house. And it would be a great city lot house as well. So it's comment, sort of, I guess.
Sure, no,
Okay.
that's what it's for. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I get a point of clarification just for?
Sure.
Is there a garage in front of the house?
That's actually a pretty accurate drawing. I did give permission for all surveyors to kind of go out and, you know, find where the front of the house is, so I'm assuming that's a fairly accurate drawing.
It is a garage.
So the garage is here?
There's a garage on the,
Okay, sorry,
there's a
yes.
garage on the front face.
Yeah,
So does that mean
This is the
that-
front, or? the
yeah,
garage
that's
is-
the front.
And the garage is here?
Yep, that little cutout is a little kind of awning for a front entry,
Okay.
and then,
And you're talking about the road being down here, is that what you're saying?
yeah, so,
Even
yeah,
further?
the whole thing, instead of having it being completely on Knight's property, it would shift down, I think approximately 16 feet or so, 8 feet of mine, and then I think there's 8 feet, but it, again, it's up to the other property owner as well. And then having the whole road shift down, allowing a little bit more setbacks for my house. That would probably move Woodstock down 16 feet as well, I would assume, but.
The, actually, I like the way you describe the domino effect, because eventually you get back to lot 19, which is the problem lot. So is this, just to clarify, Tracy, on this, you're really referring to number 4 on here, which talks about the 3/4 street, but your response is the applicant's working to acquire property necessary to allow construction of the 3/4 street. So that, does that kind of relate to exactly what he's talking about? So that would mean you wouldn't have to have the boggle in it, because the whole thing would come south a ways.
Okay.
Is that right? It wouldn't have the drop down? It would move it completely.
It would completely down, okay.
Well, and he makes a good point, because if you move the whole thing 16 feet, then you get more backyard here. Follow me? Everything kind of comes down that way, so it's just kind of important to note that. If you did it.
Okay. All right, thank you. There'll be a rebuttal for you guys to come back on that. Okay, recap.
You want to start it? You want to start?
I'll start and then we'll some stuff. So yes, we are still recommending that the FSH tract be a tract that the HOA owns and maintains. There is precedent in the past where it has just been conservation easements with the split rail fence. We are dealing with, currently I'm dealing with 2 active code enforcements where that just doesn't work. People put fences beyond the conservation easement. They think it's their property because it is, so they go and do whatever they want. I mean, this just would be a better way, whether it's dedicated to the city as we originally recommended, or placed in HOA tract. Both of those would work to make it clear. It just reduces any sort of conflict between the private property owner and the conservation easement in the FSH area. As far as the pedestrian easement for the trail, as I think I explained before, there are 2 different trails we're talking about here. One is the future alignment of the Tickle Creek Trail, and I think that's what they're showing down there with the red dashed line. That's where the Tickle Creek Trail would potentially go. We're also talking about a connector trail from this neighborhood shown here as the black dash here, but it could, in theory, go over onto the subject property here. So we just want that pedestrian easement to allow flexibility. I don't think I did mention that additional pedestrian easement last time, but that's just for the HOA to be able to access. So it wouldn't be through city property, it would be potentially on like lot 19 or maybe something off of the cul-de-sac or something off Middlebury extending further north, and that would be for the HOA to be able to go and access the tract because they then would have responsibility and they do need to keep it up. That's part of our code in the parkland section. In terms of the, let's see, the trees on the property line, there's one that's on the property line, 5 that are on the applicant's property. We're not questioning whether they're on the applicant's property. As I mentioned before, they're very close. I think most of them are within 5 feet. So we're just talking about the root zone, which extends well beyond that, as well as the canopy. it sounds like the owner isn't here tonight, so it would just be putting conservation easements on that part of the tree. Other cities do that. It's kind of standard practice some places. I would like to think that the risk of any sort of activity on this property that's outside of the city is minimal, but we are also currently dealing with one where, that case where somebody just on the outskirts of town is clear cutting along a creek. So, and it's happened twice in the recent past as well. So I hope it never happens, but just extra precaution. If it never happens, great. There's no harm in adding that conservation easement. I think the applicant's representative mentioned how we are moving towards tree protection tracks. Totally agree. That's why we're trying to get a tract here with the conservation easement over it. I think it just better protects it and again prevents that future conflict where people aren't quite sure where their property ends or where they can and can't do something or put up a fence, etc. For the tree protection zone, the 5 feet beyond drip line, that's actually what the applicant's arborist submitted last time, so that's where you're basing that on. I believe I quoted that in the staff reports. I think in this particular case, there's actually not even that many trees it's going to affect. So it's mainly these trees 523, 419, and 526, which don't appear on the handout you just received, but are 3 trees in the FSH that are close to the FSH line. So those are probably the only trees that this would affect. The other 2, 510 and 516, that are right on the FSH line, we did revise that condition to allow for exceptions based on the arborist's recommendation and having the arborist on site for any work that's done within the arbor protection zone. Having a third-party arborist, we did that recently with Jewelberry Ridge. We've done it on multiple lots in Zion Meadows. It's really similar to, we see that Todd often has to recuse himself because he works on the transportation traffic studies, and then we hire a third-party traffic engineer to represent the city. It's similar. We don't have an arborist on staff. We don't have a traffic engineer on staff. So typically we just go out to a third party. That's nothing new. Their performance bond. So it was 3 years for the street trees and 2 years for the regular landscaping. So that's the distinction.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
There was a question about the performance bond, which in all honesty, most people don't choose to use anyway. In fact, I don't know that it's really ever been used for street trees. But it's the 3 year, the reason it says 3 years and 2 years, the 3 years is for the street trees. Establishment period for trees is typically 3 years, so, or 3 growing seasons, and then the 2 years is for the other landscaping, so it'd be any other sort of landscaping on the individual lots. So that's the distinction. The midden block ramp, I think that Kelly's going to talk about a little bit more, but that was our city engineer and public works director. I'm not comfortable countering anything they say. They've looked at it twice now and commented on it twice, so we will stick with that. And then as far as the Newton Street, my understanding is that they're not actually proposing to shift the whole street down. It's just that second shift down that they're looking for, so that there would only be at the very end a half street on the subject property. I believe, so that again is our city engineer and our public works director. I believe their concern is that they just want a 3/4 street, whether it's a half street on the subject property and a 1/4 street on the property to the south, that's fine. And we updated, revised our condition to allow for that flexibility. So I think that should cover that, at least from my understanding. And they'll clarify, but I don't think they're proposing to shift all of Newton Street down.
Okay.
Although as Don mentioned, that could be an interesting idea. They can acquire that much land. To us, it's more the 3/4 street.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try not to repeat things Emily just said. If I do, I apologize. So on the first one, Tracy, Mr. Brown brought up that some of the lots that staff is recommending be smaller than 7,500 square feet. There's no justification for that. For me, I think there is, and I think the justification is to preserve the fish overlay area to the maximum extent possible. And to do that, as Emily has pointed out several times now, the only real way to do that is that there's not platted lots within that area. We have like 3 or 4 houses, or maybe even more than that, in the Timberline Estates area that had split rail fences, that now they've been actually putting lawns down in where the conservation easement's supposed to be, spraying with pesticides and doing other things down in there. And it's right in a seasonal creek bed, just north of this, actually. So we're trying to avoid that in the future. And then when we talk to the people, they're very clueless to the fact, as I would expect many homeowners to be, that they didn't know they couldn't do anything in there. You know, when you get your 600 pages with your deed, nobody reads through the whole thing. So they just thought, you know, there's a fence there. They found their property pins, and then they just started developing in there. So there's really no protection. You can put a split rail fence. You know, those things aren't pressure treated, so they fall apart within 10 years or less. Probably not the best, you know, they look great, I won't deny that, but longevity-wise, they don't last very well in this wet conditions here. So I would really like you guys to just really think about and discuss what's more important, getting the maximum lot size for potential development on every single lot in this development, or having 3 lots that will be slightly smaller, but in the end will have more preservation of the area that is supposed to be protected within our code.
Well, the fact, what's academic is the buildable area on the lot isn't changing regardless of what we do. Because they can't build in the flood slope overlay, right? We're talking about how they're owned.
Yeah, yeah.
So the buildability is fixed based on the topography.
No, I mean, they can still do what they want on their own lot.
Right, over the hill.
So they can build tree houses in there, they can put lawns, they can do anything they want, and that area won't be protected over time. It's just
The conservation easement wouldn't restrict any of that?
It would, but people, they own the lot, so they'll just, that's what we're running into, is it doesn't work. It doesn't work platting part of your lot in a conservation easement, because it's your lot. It's kind of a libertarian idea.
Yeah.
My lot's my lot, and I'll be damned that the government's gonna tell me that this section of the lot has a conservation easement on it.
Yeah.
I mean, some people will comply with it, but a lot of people won't, and that's what we're kind of running into.
Then we get a complaint from like one of the people.
That everybody
the
else
neighbor
is not
put the
adhering.
fence in
Yep.
it, and then we have to do code enforcement.
Well, at the end of the day, I know I want to interrupt you in the middle of your recap, but it's always good to take things when they're hot. You know, I'm looking at David because the applicant indicates that we don't have the authority in our code to require them to create a tract. Even, you know, we originally said deeded to the city, that went away, now it's an HOA, but at the end of the day, it's creating a tract, and that's what they object to. So I want to know legally, based on the code, can the city require the creation of a tract?
Yeah, I think it can, and the reason is, you know, the whole thing stems from, as staff is talking about, and I think as the applicant even acknowledged, you have standards. The standards say basically you can't do most things in a restricted development area. There's certain, you know, exceptions, but by and large, it remains as is sort of in its natural state. So the question becomes, are there conditions that the Planning Commission would impose in order to make that last, in order to have that code requirement be, you know, persistent? And the chapter certainly speaks to that in terms of, you know, approval authority to the Planning Commission, allowing for conditions necessary to comply with the intent and provisions of this chapter. That's what you've relied on in the past when it comes to, you know, having a conservation easement, having a split rail fence. That's certainly one option. I don't see, from a legal perspective, given that that's a reality and a way to have a condition that would ensure compliance with what the code has, that you couldn't have also the creation of a tract and maintenance obligations. So there are options there. I'm not going to say that you have to do one over the other, or that you have to do any of them. I mean, I would agree with Mr. Moore that ultimately the code is like any other code standard. The question becomes, how are those things enforced, and especially with something like this that's become something that the city's expressed in its code is an important piece for preservation purposes. You put conditions of approval in all the time to ensure that those types of code standards are complied with, you know, going forward. So that's the way I view it.
Thank you.
Moving on to can I move on to the next
Yes.
one? Okay. the trees so close to the property line, I think Emily did a pretty good job. I've counted in this exhibit that they just handed out tonight at least 6 of the green trees that are basically within a few feet, it appears, of the property line. And, you know, if we can't protect the RPZ or any area root protection zone to the east of that, it's just, do we really want to count these as retention trees? And Emily brings up a great point. You know, we just had one this week that I've been going round and round with the Clackamas County ODF now, and they just allowed a clear cut basically right in a creek basin. So, and it, you know, it just happened 2 years ago on Tickle Creek Trail, just north of Highway 211. So it's not beyond imagination that it could happen here as well. So, and all we're recommending with the condition is that if they can obtain the easement for any trees along here that need to be counted, just find other trees on the site that can meet the minimum standards and count those instead. It's not an all or nothing deal here. I think we already covered everything from the 5-foot requirement from the arborist, so I'm not going to go over that again. Second arborist opinion, yeah, we require this for any professional advice that we get. So it's not just the transportation engineer that Emily pointed out, but it's other things such as, you know, when we get a bond or anything like that, their engineer submits a bond amount, then our engineer takes a look at that bond amount before agreeing to a final bond amount. If they have an attorney, we get our attorney. The list can be endless, but it's just basically that, to have some quality control and to make sure what their professional representative is recommending would be consistent with Oregon Tree Care, I think, is who we use, who's the city arborist. So that's all that would be.
Does the, when you do the, when the city has their own transportation review, does the city pay for that?
No, the applicant does. So for the pedestrian easement only in the northeast corner of the site, I realize that they want to preserve as much area as possible for flexibility for the property owner to do what they want with it. This really gives me concern, because if the area within the FSH area is truly for conservation, and, you know, I don't see what the big deal is of having a trail anywhere within that area, because it kind of makes it sound like to me that the area down to 980 they want to maintain as private property rights. And that kind of gets to the whole question, I think, here is not really, because that area is not supposed to be touched anyways, since it's in the FSH area and it's supposed to be protected. And as Emily pointed out, I don't really see any big deal giving a little flexibility for the trail location, but you guys can talk more about that. The maintenance access easement, there's a couple reasons for that. We're recommending an HOA. I know the applicant's not in favor of that, so if there was an HOA, we think it would be good to be able to access the upper half of this area, or the southern half of the area, from, what is this, Woodstock Street? The other reason is the Clackamas County surveyor will not allow you to record a tract. So if this was a tract, an HOA tract, they won't allow you to record this tract without access or frontage on a road. We're going through it right now with Sandy Bluff 6, which is up for Sandy Woods, sorry. And so they're having to create some easements just to get around that requirement. So that was the other reason for it. Yeah, so Mr. Moore talked about the fish review for trees. I just was looking at the narrative that they submitted. Page 3 of the narrative states no development will occur in the fish, the FSH. So we didn't do this as a fish review. I mean, we could work with the applicant on that, but if they are going to be removing trees or doing anything in the FSH area, it does need to be run through that permit process. So I think if they're removing 2 trees of healthy trees, it could probably be done through a type 2 permit. But it's not part of this application. The fish area doesn't necessarily protect trees, I just want to point out. You can still apply every year to have 2 trees removed. So, I don't know. Some of these trees that they were saying will someday be, some of the purple trees will be additional retention trees. That may be true, but it also might be true that they come back later on and future staff allows them to take 2 of these away every year. Because they're not required retention trees since they're already meeting their 29. So I just wanted to point that out to give some more clarity to that. You know, Ray, Mr. Mora pointed out that it's all about the trees lately. I think it is. Our tree code stinks, to be quite frank. Everybody knows it. There's a lot of, I mean, that's a big reason for this code interpretation. There's a lot of disagreement with what the tree code says and how it's applied. And it hasn't been working. It hasn't been retaining trees how we had hoped probably when it was adopted. I understand when it was adopted, it was probably well intended, and it was probably pretty good for the time, but it's just not a good code anymore, and it's not working. And then the last one that I'll address is the ADA mid-block ramp. Yeah, we don't really get into lawsuits or any of that at a planning commission hearing. As Emily pointed out, our engineer and public works director both reviewed it. They went back and forth with Mr. Moore and All County on this, and they still recommended to install it. You know, is there going to be a situation where someone's crossing the street and gets hit by a car? That could happen anywhere in Sandy. We all know that. It's so hilly around here. So I wouldn't take that out. I would go with what our professional engineers recommended. So, and that's all I have.
Okay. All right, rebuttal.
I mean, we're still kind of requesting our same request that the fish track not be included. You know, if we were to kind of go back in time when we first submitted this application, we actually submitted 2 options. Option A was a separate track, and option B was kind of similar to what we're showing now. And we were told by staff you can't do 2 options, so we were forced to submit the option that we wanted to submit, primarily because at the, you know, during the last hearing, you saw that the list of items staff was requiring in order to dedicate property. So they wanted an environmental assessment, they wanted an appraisal, they wanted a tree or a native vegetation report, they wanted them to remove invasives and plant natives. And so we kind of totaled up that list and said that, and then they said, maybe we'll give you some money at the end of that based on the appraisal. But we kind of concluded that the cost of this list of things that the applicant had to do to give the city property really outweighed any benefit they would get back. So in stepping back, I mean, I don't think the applicant is necessarily opposed to that, but we're opposed to this laundry list of items that are needed in order to give the property to the city. If it comes down to that, we would want to retain at least 7,500 square foot lots though. Those are needed because of, for setbacks primarily. And there's those 3 trees which will be problematic for the buildability. So they, you know, as we believe, the code does allow, and it clearly says, no lot shall be platted or approved for development as exclusively in the restricted development area. So within that area, it's not only, you know, the property owner could put in their own little trail, they could plant native plants. I mean, all these things are allowed uses in the fish overlay. So it's not an area that is, you just, you know, behind your house and you forget about it forever. You can, you know, have your own little wooded spot back there and go down and enjoy the creek or whatever. It's your own little sanctuary behind your house. So our preference is still to keep the lots platted into that area, because that's kind of what we were forced to do based on this list of things that the city was requiring the applicant to do in order to give the city this free property. Other than that, you know, we kind of stand by our original, really concerned about the HOA, creation of that, and without a tract, unless it is given to the city, there is no need for an HOA, so that wouldn't be necessary. The third-party review of the trees, I mean, it's kind of one of those things, in all cases, the city has their own people do the third-party review, and so the condition was making it sound like the applicant needed to hire another arborist to now look at 4 trees, and so it didn't really make sense. What is the point of that? You know, I personally, the only reason they're questioning the arborist is because he wrote in a few extra qualifiers next to those 4 trees. And as he explained in his most recent narrative, as well as when he testified, that is just provide additional detail. It doesn't say that those trees are problematic in any shape or form. And they do qualify as protection trees. So this is just another, you know, expense to the property owner. That's really unnecessary, and it's gonna serve really no purpose. Trees next to the property line and getting an easement, that may, you know, it's a judgment call if you think that those trees are gonna be compromised. The next door property owner was here today, speaking about his house that's on that property. So it's the same property owner. He owns all the way down to the creek there. Didn't seem like he was talking about logging the property or doing anything down in that area. It's hard to say what's going to happen, but I think the risk is pretty minimal that will occur. I think that's pretty much it. I guess it kind of depends on, you know, there's still this list that we just got tonight, or saw tonight, and it kind of depends how you feel about some of the items that are the big items in terms of which of these items on this list will be relevant or not. So we'd like to, if you're willing to keep the hearing open as you kind of go through and deliberate, so we can provide a little additional input as you kind of hone in on your decision regarding some of these items, particularly on this list.
Okay.
Tracy, if you were to do the dedication back, where would you see the maintenance access easement go? Okay, I mean, I'm just curious.
I think, you know, it adjoins city-owned property, so I don't really think.
Well, maybe I ask you, the city's asking for an easement to that property if it was dedicated over, right?
Mhm.
So they're asking it from this property. Where would you see that? I understand there's other ways to get to it, but maybe it's a Ray question.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Inside the creek.
For the record, Ray Moore, Salt County Surveyors and Planners. I think staff has recommended an easement or an access easement along the east line of 19.
East line of 19?
Yeah, and if you really look at the big picture, I mean, we're 2-to-1 fill slope on the back of 19 and whatever, 24 feet of grade. So we could build a staircase down there, and then once you get down there, there's sock full of trees. So I'm not sure what kind of maintenance and how you're really gonna get down there to do anything.
Well, the reason I was asking was just for that, what does it do actually to that lot?
Yeah.
Okay, because the way that it shows here as it's platted or supposed to be platted, you're taking away 8 feet of it,
Yeah.
right? So it changes the configuration to a pretty good degree.
In the city code, I believe, they can correct me if I'm wrong, typically an access easement we've done all over the place. Zion Meadows, mid-block access easement to the park. We have to dedicate 15 feet, build an 8-foot wide sidewalk. When we talked to staff early on, it's like, really? We're gonna build a concrete staircase down? Just doesn't make sense. So again, that goes back to don't create a tract, let the homeowner maintain it.
Well, again, I understand that, but I'm asking, if hypothetically, if that was the case, how would that go and what would it look like? So, okay.
Yeah, it'd be pretty ugly. I'd like to address proposed condition approval number 79 just briefly. Kelly pointed out that we have a condition that we're looking like here. The applicant shall either identify.
You let everybody get to it.
Oh, okay, sure. There's no page number, but it's item 79.
Yep. Got it.
I'll just read it quickly. The applicant shall either identify an additional 6 retention trees on the subject property or obtain an easement from the neighbor. Well, that's out of our control. We can't have a condition that relies on the neighbor, okay? I'm not even sure if that condition is legal. That would have to be sorted out prior to this meeting, if that's an option, because we don't know if he's gonna give us an easement or not. So let's just assume that's out. So then we have to live by the other side. The other side of that condition says, we shall identify 6 more trees. Going back to my exhibit that Tyler passed out, we have more than enough trees, 63. What I do want you to do is, could you turn to page 10 of the drawings that we submitted? And this is crucial because, you know, we did look for more trees. You know, we're not opposed to saving trees, but we didn't save trees.
Which is 10.
Yeah, page 10 of our engineering drawings. No, it's with the original packet.
I could probably, give me a
Yeah,
second. I'll
somebody
find
find
it.
it.
Yeah,
It's
it's
page
a real
1.
important exhibit that's gonna go hand in hand
Well,
with this condition.
Hold on a second, it's page 128 of your PDF document.
Thank you.
I think that's what Ray's referring to. Was it 3, sheet 3?
It's sheet 10 of 10.
Oh, okay, so it's gonna be later than that.
Yeah, it was. It should be kind of a colorful drawing. What's that reference? Oh, don't go up.
I'm on page 128 of the PDF, but
Yeah, but I
It's a
mean,
road
it's like,
cro-
it's like this, showing up like this.
cross-section of a road.
Oh, wow.
I mean, can you somehow change the,
Or you can get up on the screen here.
can you do a right click? Yeah, there you go. Right there.
I saw page 9 of 10, but I don't see page 10.
And the mouse isn't running
Yeah,
very
it's
fast.
running slow, yeah.
Well, I can
The
kind of
mouse isn't
explain.
running very fast.
Yeah.
So the site has a lot of trees, has a lot of overgrown Christmas trees. And at face value, man, we should be able to save 6 more trees, whether they're needed or required or not. The exhibit that I was referring to is basically a drawing that overlays our proposed site grading. We have to, you know, not only save all these trees, we have to also meet public works standards. Roads have to be designed at certain grades, sewer has to drain out certain directions. And if you're familiar with the site, Jacoby Road is somewhat higher than kind of the middle portion of it. If you've been out there, you can kind of just visually see, wow, you know, we're gonna have to fill that. So we have a cut and fill analysis in that sheet 10. And it's a colorful analysis and it indicates the amount of cut and or fill with different colors. And so to try to save a tree where we're cutting 10 feet to fill a road, you just can't do it. So I'd like to say, yeah, gee, we'll just save 6 more trees, but I don't think we can. Not without doing some really funky stuff, building walls in the backyard, holding up the lots, so you get sewer to drain and your roads to work. To have a condition like that, we could probably meet it somehow, but man, it would be ugly. And I'm not sure if the trees would survive. So I just go back to our exhibit, we're saving all the trees we can possibly save within the FSH overlay, which exceeds the code. We can't rely on the neighbor to get an easement. So I would ask that condition really be thought about and eventually deleted. Just because that would have a hard time moving it.
And Ray, one more question while you're there. On, Mr. Sparkman asked about the jog on Newton.
Yeah.
Is the proposed jog that's there, is that enough, or is he looking for more?
Yeah, the exhibit up there, actually, things were kind of fluid right here at the 11th hour. That exhibit actually is demonstrating how we can get a 3/4 street on the flagpole to the south. So that exhibit actually demonstrates how we can satisfy the city and
You can,
the adjacent homeowner saving his house. So we can meet the garage setbacks. And the way there is a condition drafted in here that says either straighten the road out and aim right for that house or obtain property from the neighbor. And so I can live with that condition because we've talked to the neighbor about it. And he's willing
The one on the south.
to use his flagpole, which is his access, as public road right away. He all of a sudden gets the road that much closer to his future development. So it's sort of a win-win. It allows us to re-engineer the road to miss his house. So that condition as drafted with the or in there to straighten it out or get the property to the south is perfect. I don't have any objections, and we can make that one work, so.
Wait,
Thank you.
while you're still up there,
Yeah.
can you explain why on this one that I was just given, that 523, 419, and 526?
Why we were
being-
taking those out?
Yeah.
Because, like our arborist said, you know, they're trying to protect out to the drip line. And the grading that we had done in planning, graded right up to within 10 feet of the tree. So to save those trees, we have to re-engineer the road, do something a little different to stay, you know, out of the drip line. So it was easier to take those out. But, like I said, that's something that we could, you know, submit an application later after this hearing and deal. So you don't necessarily need to approve the removal of those trees now. I don't know if you can. We didn't ask for the.
Yeah,
the
it doesn't
appropriate
sound like we
permits.
can, I just
Right.
wanted to understand.
That was why, just
And-
because that fill went to, you know, 6 or 8 feet from the base of the tree. So.
Okay, and if that lot was smaller, would that still be an issue?
Yeah, that would be
It
the same
either
issue.
way,
Right.
okay.
Right. Any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody need to see that?
You want a break?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a little break before we come back and do our discussion.
Jerry, how many minutes? Just so
5 at the most.
Okay.
We say 5. We aim for 5. Okay. We'll see how we can tackle this elephant. I'm not going to give my big spiel about keeping the public hearing open because you guys heard it last time and you already know it. So, but for anybody else in the audience, the public hearing is open, but only for us to ask questions of the applicant. So any public testimony or comments are not proper from now on. Okay. Maybe to break the ice, let's get back to the interpretation issue. And that kind of will lay the ground for some of the work. And that was on our motion to interpret.
Page.
And
Maybe
what,
out of order, I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you want me to explain these colors? They're just pretty colors, but.
when we get to them, yeah,
Okay.
we'll call you.
Sorry.
Where am I looking here? So the basic question, we can look at the minutes, but they were maybe not that,
It's at the bottom of page 4 of the minutes, and I made the motion, and with David's help over the phone a little bit, I think. But it's really simple. It says, although the chapter 1792 clearly states in its title all zones, the chart in the chapter does not list all zones, which creates confusion in terms of intent, right? So chapter 17.102 is to be applied to subdivisions in place of 17.92.10C in regard to tree retention, period, into motion. So the staff wants something different, I guess I would need to know from the staff what they need to have clarified or where they see the ambiguity of the problems are.
yeah, that was my understanding, that we basically, when it came to subdivisions, we pointed to 17.102 and crossed out 1792. In a simple way.
When I heard the testimony, I felt this, it was similar to that. I just felt like when it came to residential subdivisions, we were excluding 1792.10C. And it would be, that would just be removed for residential subdivision.
But the staff is asking for clear wording, so what I already know is what additional is staff looking for that we can help them with.
Just what we could write in a finding as the basis.
Oh, that's what you asked for.
Yeah,
was-
they're asking
was
us
the
for what
basis.
was our basis in that.
The basis.
Confusion enough?
Yeah. Well, I guess one of my
You're
concerns,
signing so.
We had public testimony, it had a lot of history to it, we saw the ambiguity, and so we made a decision, kind of like a judge.
Yeah, it was pretty quick, though. I'm not sure how that conversation went. You know, what we came back to was that it's confusing, right? And we wanted to stop the confusion.
For the moment,
but
until.
For the moment, until
Yeah. which
until
is
the
why
tree
you-
committee meets and this gets redone.
That's
Right.
what sent me off,
Exactly.
that we
Mhm.
all heard, that
Uh-huh.
I wanted to get, we're gonna have subdivisions between now and then. It's at the end of the day.
Mhm.
We gotta provide guidance to make it happen, so I don't see this as a final decision. I
Well,
see it
that's-
as one to move forward with for the moment, and if nothing else, it ought to motivate the tree committee to get something done, so it is the way everybody wants it and can agree
Right.
to. And at the council meeting where they talked about it, I guess the plan is it to be to us by the end of September. So
Well,
it sounded like, at least there was a deadline, and it sounded reasonable to me.
Yeah, so I guess that's the thing that I thought needed to be clear, that wasn't maybe totally clear, was that when we were talking, I thought of it as this is a temporary kind of
Mhm.
stopgap thing.
Mhm.
And then as soon as we had that conversation, then Mr. Brown got up and started to say, well, then all these other things don't apply then. So I guess I just want to make sure we're careful about that this is a temporary solution to a problem that's much larger. We need to revisit it. This isn't the new law of the land.
Well, it is the new
It's-
law of the
yeah,
land.
temporary.
It is the new law of the land.
Okay.
It will get changed if
Okay.
it gets changed. So like I say, that's the motivation. So, yeah, anything that ties to that, yeah, I mean, is, either applies or doesn't apply. But I think, Kelly said it, just together with Ray Moore said it, everybody believes that there's a whole bunch of confusion and everybody just needs to get it resolved. But we have to do business in the next 6 months, in one way or the other.
Do we need more than that,
Yeah, I
David?
think-
as-
Yeah, that's, I was
As
going to
a,
ask.
as a rationale or
I
basis?
think that gives me a lot more.
Yeah, I think that what you've said is fine. I mean, if that provides staff with the extra context they
Uh-huh.
want on this, I think that's fine.
Kelly, does that?
Yeah, for me it does, yeah. We can
Yeah,
write something up.
I mean, it's
Okay.
still not ideal.
some notes.
We're
Yeah.
not saying it's perfect, but
But it doesn't
It helps.
double up tree retention.
Well, and
standards.
to be honest with you,
It doesn't have two different,
well, and to be honest with you,
Retention.
Tracy gave us, because we'll talk later, but the schedule of potential meetings up through July, and of all of these, none of them are subdivisions.
right.
So
Yeah.
we just kind of need to get through this one.
Oh, that's true.
And they may, and even the ones that may come, they don't all have issues.
I did have one topic, or one question to ask.
Uh-huh.
When I looked at 1792, 10C, I felt it had two provisions in it. It talked about tree diameter, and it talked about drip line. And I did not get from my watching of the 25th whether both of those were being applied to that exception, or if it was just the tree diameter. So
No,
could
it
you
was
clarify
the-
that for me?
The intent was the whole paragraph,
The whole
section
paragraph,
C.
Okay. Because that is, knowing that, then it would support the applicants saying that it would remove a lot of the redundancies that were in the conditions,
Mhm.
because they would negate it.
Okay, that was the easy part, I think.
You think so?
All right. You would just want to work down through the conditions. Oh, let me speak to the, as I understand it, and Emily, correct me, on the redundancy in the conditions. What Emily's done is taken the bold things out and just got them sequentially from the staff report, puts them in a list. And just because of the way the code is written, there's often an identical response to a different section of code. So it may be here, it says therefore the condition is this way, and then later on there's a different twist to the code and the same sentence is there. So rather than curate all those things, she just copies and pastes them sequentially from the staff report, and that's why you get redundancies or duplications. It's not it's not any reflection on the staff's inability to see that. It's just much easier for them to just go back, get all the bold, pull them out, put them in a list. And if you see a duplication, just recognize that it's a duplication.
Can I add something real fast for clarity's sake too? So when you see the final order at the end too, we had to order them based on the process order. So some of the conditions will be tied to prior to applicant receiving grading permits, prior to applicant receiving construction plan approval, individual home construction and so on. So these would be ordered.
Right, in the final order, they get put in categories.
Correct.
In the final order, are they duplicated at all?
No.
Okay, so we could get a list that says no duplicates if you just wanted to make one more filter down the line.
Potentially, yeah, yeah. If we have more time, yeah.
Okay, but your explanation is quite valid.
Yeah, that's all it is. I'm just looking down through, and I think that's about the best thing we can do, unless you want to go to the applicant's bringing out, Tracy's 4-page letter that we got today, with today's report.
My suggestion is to do that because those are the things that they're concerned about.
Okay.
And ours, I think, is going to cover almost everything.
Well,
I want to make sure that
But
there's
they
nothing.
got to start somewhere.
I'm gonna bring up maybe another way too, so. And just of taking my notes here, which, the pertinent points that are there, that I've written down, it seems that the dedication or leaving the area as a conservation plat, whatever, is the biggie.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
And maybe getting us to figure out where we sit on that.
That's a good point.
Because I'm looking at the rest of them, the tree retention, they're all important, don't get me wrong. But it just seems that that is really
It's
the
it's the
pivot
big one.
point on it. Because then again, the maintenance access, it just, so.
And that's going to want on his list.
Yep.
Sorry, then we can go through the list one by one.
Okay, I agree. That is, that is the big one, is to what to do with that fish overlay area. Staff is recommending that it be an HOA plat. The applicant would like them to just be individual lots. That as the plan that we have. Thoughts, comments
Is there a third one instead of the homeowners, is a dedication
to the city?
to the city of that property?
Yeah, that was the original.
That was the first one that was what the recommendation on February 25th that they reacted to. The HOA is on our April 8th
Okay.
one.
Right.
And Tracy addressed that.
So-
So,
The extra conditions they said that staff was imposing, so you had to get like the environmental assessment, appraisal, all that kind of stuff. That's all, I think that's predominantly in the code. Well, I know the phase one is and some of the other stuff, so we have a section that says when we take land dedication, there are some minimum standards that the land dedicator has to do before we assume the property. So a lot of that, I think, was based on that. I can't say every single requirement was, I don't have that list in front of me, because we kind of dropped it off since we're not really discussing it in this staff report, but if you did go into 1786 within our development code for land for dedication, there is some requirements there for phase one environmental assessments and stuff like that, so.
And that's only if it's dedicated to the city. If it goes to an HOA tract, those disappear, and that's primarily, after hearing the applicant,
Why you
that
came
was
up
their
with
big
that.
reason they didn't want to dedicate to the city. We said, well, we can just have it as an HOA tract, and then we don't have to do a phase one environmental, we don't have to do that native vegetation report.
I see. So the choices are the HOA tract
well, the tract is a separate thing. I think that's important to note.
or the dedication.
Well,
Pardon?
they were against a tract, okay, now, so tract or no tract is kind of one deviation. Next thing is, once you do it, once you set up a tract, then,
Who does it go to?
then
Who does it
how do
go
you
to?
manage it? Do you
Were
give
they,
it to the
were they
city? Do
against
you
the
make it
tract,
an
or were they
HOA?
against all the stipulations in order to dedicate a tract?
Yeah, so,
Second one.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
yeah, so you really, you got three options. You know, for management, you have an HOA, the city, or the landowner.
Individual owners, yeah.
Landowner. So what's important, I think, is step back and say, what are the objectives? What do we really just want out of in there? And then what's the best
To
way to get those
preserve the
objectives, right? You want to
fish.
preserve it in a conservation way, okay? You don't want them, and you don't want people building tree houses down there. Or a permanent structure like we had once. That was a bad day, or bad night. But we had to ask them to remove it. So, because I agree 100% with what the applicant said. One, HOAs are difficult
Yeah,
to deal
they-
with,
I
number
don't
one.
like them.
Number
Yeah,
two,
I think there's
every,
only seven
all you gotta do is
houses
bring,
that-
all you gotta do is bring code
Yeah.
enforcement in, and they'll give you the definition of 15 bad days that can result. And so, based on all the intentions, still, how do you get it done? And, you know, at the end of the day, to meet all the objectives the city had would be for the city to own the land. You put the trail wherever you want, you can restrict access, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
What is impeding that, the applicant says, and whatever your number is tit for tat, is they have to spend some money to give that to the city. If the city wanted it bad enough, it seemed to me like the city would figure out a way to make that a win-win, but,
I did,
that's, I mean, that's,
Yeah,
I like to
we
see it be
can't.
kind of, because that to me would be where they want to go. So short of them doing that, because of the city requirements or whatever, then you basically got two choices. One is a separate, tract. They formed HOA, and I'm not sure what the HOA does. How would they collect fees to do what?
Yeah.
Look at it. The second one is, as they have suggested, that they plat them, and then you put a conservation easement in with whatever restrictions you want, which gives you probably the least amount of control.
Right, that just seems like it would be really hard, based on what we've heard, what's going on. It would be really hard code enforcement. It's gonna be harder to protect what we're supposed to be protecting, right?
I agree exactly what Kelly said.
Yeah.
People don't know and understand. I
Yeah,
lived in
they
a
don't
neighborhood
understand.
that across the street from me, the lots are 3+ acres. And the houses are much smaller than that, though they're nice houses. And they're over the edge with chainsaws all the time. I could be calling code enforcement every time I turn around.
But then you go through and you create this HOA that's supposed to police itself from letting the people go back into it. Okay? And then you have guy down on lot number 9, oh, I gotta pay my fees for the HOA to do the maintenance up there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
You turn the HOA into an enforcement outfit.
Correct.
Yeah.
From themselves.
There's only seven lots backing up to that green area that they would be sharing for an HOA.
Well, I know, the HOA probably be the whole subdivision.
I-
That's undefined.
Just my comment.
Right. Well,
I could not support an HOA
Yeah.
for that area. Coming from an HOA myself, it used to be. I don't think any other landowner in that area who would be in the future development would support that.
Yeah, and that's his point, is that there's only a few lots, and you have the person down here in lot 9 paying HOA fees
Yes.
for
Yeah.
property that he can't
Yeah.
access
Yeah, I mean, I see it,
without going
I
through
tend to
somebody's
agree
yard.
with that. So I see kind of two options.
Two
One
choices.
is, the city,
Mhm.
and if that's been rolled out, is to go ahead and plat it and to decide what you're gonna have in a conservation easement to try and minimize the effect of the property owners piling over the edge and building tree houses or
Right.
doing whatever you don't want them to do.
We could look at the.
Is the city having it, is that not possible? Isn't there is there a way from
I mean, I
staff's
see it
point of
as a
view?
possibility. They didn't want to have any extra expenses. I mean, I don't know who you think does the code enforcement. It's my staff.
Right,
It's not the code enforcement officer doing tree retention requirements.
it's
Right.
planning.
It's planning.
Yeah,
So it's Emily or James or myself. So
Well,
there's not like a big bad guy in a dark room that comes and busts people. It's going to be one of the three of us that would have
Well,
to
yeah,
like,
but
get in there and check
yep,
it out.
but I think we need to make our decision based upon not the staff, the staffing of the city or whatever. I mean, the city's growing. If you need more staff, that's another discussion. It's a budget discussion. It's with the council and all the rest. I think we need to make it an ideal world that somebody would be there to enforce the code if that's the way you basically did it. It's no different than the call of 911, hope the police shows up, and if they don't, then that's a police budgeting issue.
But
So, but our, yeah, go ahead.
I was just, even having heard the applicant's resistance to it being dedicated to the city, we
Well,
can
their
still do
resistance was
that.
based on cost. It wasn't based on they didn't
Right.
want to do it, because they're not going to get any money out of this anyway.
Mhm.
This
Sure.
land is, and they can't build on it, they can't
not
do anything
buildable.
with it.
Right.
I don't know if a landowner might pay a little more for a lot that's bigger, only because they're looking over the edge into a creek area, so their backyard is more private, as opposed to a subdivision where you're looking at the neighbor's fence.
And they
So
probably.
that might make those lots a little bit more valuable, but you can't change the fish overlay.
Right,
You can't change the topography.
right.
In fact, on lot 19, it's got a, where the street is, it's got a certain buildable lot. Right now, Ray knows where it is. It is, and it's got to be back 25 feet from the 25% slope.
Mhm. Yep.
Chair, could we ask the applicant, I think, maybe I got a different message from what I heard. I felt like they were willing to give the tract if the stipulations were more reasonable. Not
That's what I
knowing what
thought I
those
heard.
stipulations are, could we look at those stipulations to see what is required and what isn't required?
That's what
Because
Kelly
maybe
was
we can
referring to
ease
earlier.
that burden, because that sounds like it's the best option.
Yeah, that's what
For the
Kelly had
city.
referred to. They're in the code.
I mean, Kelly was just referring to those. He gave us a quick summary, but
I can read them to you. They are,
We're not asking anything yet, Tracy. Yeah.
Yeah.
they're in 1786 of your code. It deals with, I think what we'd be really talking about here is open space dedication. There's language about parkland dedication. I don't think that's really what you're getting here. I mean, ultimately, this would be open space that would be, sought to be protected. And in fact, it even talks about types of open space that may be provided: natural areas, areas of undisturbed vegetation, steep slopes, and then there's greenways. So I think it fits within that. And what it says is basically, open space shall be maintained so that the use and enjoyment thereof is not diminished or destroyed, and may be owned, preserved, and maintained by any of the following mechanisms or combinations thereof. So the first one is dedication to the city of Sandy, and that's the one that has, prior to the acceptance, the city may require the developer to submit a Phase 1 environmental site assessment according to an engineering standard. I'll leave it at that. The results of this study shall indicate a clean environmental record. Number B, or letter, item B, common ownership by HOA. C is a sort of a twist on A, dedication of development rights to an appropriate public agency. And then D is a deed-restricted private ownership preventing development or subsequent subdivision, which is really what the applicant's proposal is tonight. Basically have a conservation easement over it, but it wouldn't involve any dedication. So I think the issue comes down to in that first one, prior to the acceptance of the proposed open space, the city may require the developer to submit a Phase 1 ESA.
yeah, that's what I was going to make sure you
Okay.
said, may.
May.
So if staff is recommending that, that's what I hear.
Has there been other instances where that's something, I mean, it may very well be that as a matter of policy, the city wants that Phase 1 assessment, because if it takes on property and it's got an environmental problem, now that's the city's burden.
I do know that when in the defunct and dysfunctional HOA that I moved into 30 years ago, we eventually turned over to the city our common property. And that our homeowners, we didn't have to do anything. I don't know what the city did, if they ran your own tests, or what, but we didn't have to do anything. We were getting rid of an albatross at the moment, so we were just, we were a bunch of homeowners, we weren't a developer. But I do know from
Well, it'd be the
history.
same thing, though. It's like they form an HOA here and they make it run, and then 15 years from now, it's a headache, and they come to the city and say, you want this?
Yeah, that's what,
Well, it almost sounds like the city does want it
So-
because of the
They
trail
wanna
or the
protect that
proposal of the
fish.
other trail. And the
Well, they
access.
would, but the point is that,
let's go
I
ahead,
don't know.
David.
That's just one of the options, and I just focused on the word may, and so
Yeah.
that kicks you to another question.
I think what I would suggest, there is may there, but then the question is who gets to make that call? Given that we're talking about, potential environmental problems that the city may acquire as a result of taking a dedication, it seems like the city's general practice is always to have that phase one done. So you could have, if that's something we want to explore, I suppose one option would be to say, have it done unless otherwise waived by either the city council or the city manager. Someone that's sort of generally makes that call. That would be one option.
Well, with all due respect to the city, it wouldn't be unreasonable to me if the city really wants it, that the city would do that and pay for it, because they're getting the land. So, it wouldn't be unreasonable for the city to want one, to do one, not necessarily require the applicant to do it, because they are getting something for what they're, some money out of it. So, at the end of the day, I like to just see things become a win-win.
That's, Don, to piggyback on that, that's the thing is, everybody here wants to preserve this, we understand what it means, right, and protect it. So we all want that. Now, what's the best way? The HOA, I think we're all saying, we don't think that's the way to go through it. So going back and getting that property into the city's hands, if that's the way the applicant would go, how do we do that? And I'm not sure if maybe we go back and ask the applicant, is that a road, because that's the third possibility that we didn't have on the table a little bit ago, and we're talking about it like it is one. I think maybe we should stop and
See
find
if
out
it
from the
is.
applicant, is that something that you'd be willing to entertain? And then, if it is, then we can go into another discussion, how do we get there?
Well, entertain now, because they said earlier in their testimony, they entertained it initially, threw it out because of the cost. So that's when they landed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they want to go back to that position or not.
All right, one question maybe before we ask. If it does go to the city, does that help with the requirement for the maintenance access? Since the
Does it
city's
solve-
property, it would be just expanding the city's property, and would that also eliminate possibly?
I don't know how much, there was apparently comments from the county surveyor, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
they just got back to me on another subdivision Friday, and they won't record without direct access. I think it just changed. They're kind of always changing their tune over there.
But is that just for a tract, or would that be
It's
even
any-
if it's,
Well, if
even
the
if
city's
it's,
adjacent property.
Oh, if it's
runs
not a
another
tract.
street,
right, that's,
I don't know. It'd have to be a surveyor question.
Yeah, well, there's
It's the
this,
property to the north that we don't.
Yeah, I think they would still say it's an individual tract, and it
But this-
doesn't have direct access.
yeah, but is the city own the land right to the property line of this
That's what I'm
property?
saying. So we could do an easement to the city.
Ray pointed
yeah,
across
you
the
could
creek,
right,
but
the city
do
should
you own it right to the boundary? So
Yeah.
there's access right on your own
But
property.
they won't let you record the plat until there's access to it.
Yeah, but
But it
it's right off through your land. That's where the access is, from the north.
They were telling me today, or on Friday, they don't count that anymore. It has to be direct, so we could maybe figure it, I'm sure there could be a way to figure it out.
Well,
I'm
you
just
could-
saying that.
Even if you had
before-
8 feet wide, you still build a stairway down, you say you got access to the top of the slope. That's to your property, right?
Correct, yeah.
Done.
So I think that might be able to work that way, yeah.
I believe there is a pedestrian access easement along that tract of land that abuts this property, I believe, already.
Which way, on the east?
From Jacoby all the way across, so that, I know we could have a larger blowout of.
Well, I think we should, how about if we find out if doing that is a possibility?
Let's ask the question.
Let's ask,
Yeah.
ask the question.
Not that we would have to obligate ourselves, but
No,
your feelings on this, on dedicating it to the city.
if they want a caucus for a second, they want a caucus. Sounds like a big decision to me. Well, Dr. Exner, welcome to the party. Yeah, well, are we? kind of expecting you a couple hours ago. Thought you might bring some of your newer counselors with you. Never been to a planning commission meeting.
I came from the planning commission, but it was a
Yeah.
Now bring a couple of your new ones so they can see the crap we go through.
I mean, it'd be the whole list from the February 25th meeting. Any concerns with
Yeah,
the list?
yeah.
We'd have to look.
Yeah.
Trees,
I don't know.
trees, trees and fish overlays.
Make sure I.
Either that or
Look at all this stuff. Doesn't this bring back memories for you?
set it up as an option. One option will be.
Well, that's just printing out. Hey, wait a minute, I just printed the pertinent stuff. See, when they posted it, it was 404. Now they're telling me it's 572.
I'm sure.
Proceed with the conservation.
No, I think, well, no, because there's not 63 trees.
Yeah, but they seem to be
here. I don't think there are.
Yeah, there
I don't
are
know.
63.
I really don't know.
In
what
just
it
this
is.
area here?
Yes, uh-huh.
Oh, okay, so all the trees
Did
are
it go
being
well
retained
tonight?
there.
But they're saying that some of the 30
We'll
of the
catch up with you
trees
tomorrow.
are smaller
Yeah.
right now, but
They don't count.
Yeah,
as
they don't meet the
retention
minimum
trees.
retention.
Yeah, we'll catch up tomorrow.
well, they're saying they still
Okay.
have enough retention trees, plus the other 30.
We need to keep moving.
These, if you took these
We,
6
uh,
out, then you'd have less.
It's kind of a privilege that we give
That's
you
right.
to
Tree mass.
caucus, as Don says. But go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I guess a couple things. One is regarding the environmental assessment. I mean, I would testify as the director, there was cases where I didn't require environmental assessment. You know, I think it's discretionary, and I believe the language said it's the director may. And I know in another section it says the director may. You know, so the reason for requiring it would be to determine, is there some, you know, hazardous waste dump under this property that the city is taking over, you know? I think the risk of that is pretty slim, knowing the property, but I think there is a discretion. So regarding the, you know, dedication versus not, we would prefer a condition that allowed the applicant flexibility of either platting it with a conservation easement or dedicating it, assuming, you know,
Doesn't
this
say anything
issue
with the
of
director, no, I
access
didn't see
and
it.
the environmental assessment can be resolved, and the applicant wouldn't be responsible for that. You know, we wouldn't wanna commit to platting it and dedicating it to the city, and then, the item that Kelly was mentioning regarding access blew it up, so that would be a problem later on. So we wanna make sure there's enough flexibility in a condition. You know, I think, it's my impression in talking to the applicant that assuming they're not gonna be on the hook for, you know, a bunch of studies and assessments, they're not opposed to dedicating and assuming the county surveyor will allow that. And because of the direct connection to existing city property, I don't think the county surveyor is gonna have a problem with that.
But let's say, I want to be clear, let's say that they did have a problem. Would the applicant be willing to entertain dedicating to the city with the proviso that they provide the maintenance access?
I don't think we're as interested in that because it's gonna affect some of the lots.
I know it will, that's why I'm asking. It would
It only affects-
absolutely
well,
affect
you got-
it.
You show the 8 feet along lot 19.
That's why we would want the either or, you know, the flexibility there.
For the record, Ray Moore, all county surveyors again. I think Emily sort of hit it on the nail on the head. I think if the county surveyor would accept the easement that the city already has to the north, it may solve that problem. So that's why the applicant would like the flexibility, hey, or if it doesn't work out because of these other issues, access, you know, we still have the option, since it's a condition, to plat the lots with an easement.
Yeah, but I'm trying to kind of broker it. You kind of want the best of both of them here, okay? So I'm saying if they don't go through and give the maintenance access, could you put it, you know, between lots 26 and 27, or work to make that happen? And I do understand there's some realignment, but I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work.
I guess it depends on what that's gonna need to look like. I don't know, is staff wanting a paved road down there, or are they just wanting a platted easement? So, and that's why if you have the condition with an or, we can work out with them the access.
I thought you were gonna come down off of 19.
That's not a problem, but do we need to build something? You know, I haven't heard. Do we need to build stairs? Do we need to throw a rope down there? I mean, what's the?
And we won't know tonight.
Yeah, we won't know tonight because if you work off what you had on 19, okay, the eastmost property,
Yeah.
you're gonna lose 8 feet of that, right?
At least.
And so, at least, and so that lot, is it even buildable with the loss of that 8 foot?
Which one? On
19?
19.
Yeah, the furthest east.
I'm not trying to make this more difficult, but I kinda heard from the city that this access, the surveyor, they're saying, no, we gotta figure a way to get onto that property off of this subdivision.
Well, I think they came back and said they're not sure.
Yeah, so
That
Ron,
because it would be a budding city property already, and with the easement there. We don't know.
So one of the Mac just pointed out that there is a 7.5 foot side yard setback. So if it's an 8 foot easement, access easement, it's not undoable.
Okay.
Could create an easement there and still easily build on that lot.
On the east side of 19?
Yeah, it's just a matter of 6 inches. I think one thing that Tracy said earlier today that we still need to clarify a little bit is this tract include all of the FSH? Because we would prefer to have at least the 7,500 square feet of the lots, because I think that's important. House burns down, hey, well, your lot's undersized, it's not 7,500 square feet. I think we wanna maintain that minimum 7,500 square feet, which would clip off a little bit of that FSH overlay. So in this agreement or this understanding, we would request that we maintain a minimum of 7,500 square feet.
Do you have any idea?
Where would that be?
You probably know.
Yeah, how
this,
much
Greg.
space
So
would that
basically
be?
comes
How big is this
Come all the
lot
way
right
there?
now,
Yeah.
as you see it? I mean, how big is it right there?
Oh.
Well,
I think that's
for a good
very
example, if you just extend the north line of the adjacent lots,
It would
yeah,
go
there you
like
go.
there.
It'd be 7,500
So
square feet.
you lose all of
Right.
this stuff
Lot
right here.
19 is a little bit bigger.
And you
And
lose all
that's not,
those
and
trees.
that's,
a little
that's really
wider.
not very much.
Well.
It's just a little bit over the hill. They still can't build there.
They can't build
It
there.
doesn't change the
They'll be
building
protected.
footprint at all.
Yeah.
Exactly. They can't build on it, but their pins would be out there and,
There's a lot less property for them to
Right.
mess up with.
And they would have,
Really?
they could measure their setbacks.
Yeah, you don't have to police as much.
Yeah, that, I mean, that makes sense.
So I think what I'm
It's
hearing,
losing
thank you guys.
Just to add a little clarity to Ray's comment there, if the house burned down, it wouldn't matter as far as the lot buildability.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a buildable lot of record that's recorded
Yeah.
on a plat.
Right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't change the setbacks. I just want, sounds like you
Yeah.
guys are all aware of that, but
Yeah.
I don't know what that was in reference
was
to,
a
but
funny-
that would not be the case.
I think, I agree with what Ron's saying. It is the best of both worlds, but the point is, we're trying to give options here. Because we all have been in this game a little while, you and I have. If things change as you go down the road, and if the objective of the city and the applicant is all there, it seems like you figure out, what kind of works. And I think it worked best for the city if you could acquire the land. Because then all these questions where the trail goes
I
and the
agree.
easement, all that just goes
Yeah.
away.
Right.
So it seems like it's worth the effort to try and make that.
So sounding like what we're talking is a condition that would kind of be a priority.
I mean, David and I looked at the code. I don't think David found anything that says the developer has the option to waive a phase 1 environmental. So I don't know what Tracy did when he was the director, but I don't see a code provision that really.
Oh, you mean the director?
Director
Yeah,
name.
director.
Director name.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that talks about director per se. It just talks about city, says may. I didn't see anything that,
It may be in the parkland dedication.
that's where I'm
That's
looking.
what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's where, I mean,
So
it's
you're
possible.
trying
I'm
to figure
missing-
who's the delegation of
I think
authority
it'd be
there?
the city manager. I mean, on any property, as David already pointed out, since I've worked here for 8 years, when there's a property transaction occurring, we always check with the city manager or the council if the city manager's not comfortable. The department heads are typically not in charge of property transactions. Because it affects multiple department budgets potentially. So I think if we made a flexible condition, that would be a very good idea. But I don't feel comfortable making a final decision on whether we want to take this property without a phase 1 or not. If Jordan's fine with that, whatever, I don't care.
Well, I'm sure
Yeah,
you'll do the
but-
staff work with him and,
Correct. But I wouldn't feel comfortable just doing that, because I don't
It could be,
know.
yeah, it could be written such that it would be basically, unless waived by the city manager, you know, that wouldn't preclude even necessarily how that phase one would occur, if it does occur, you know, I mean, it could be written flexibly enough to allow for different options.
I mean, I will say we have one property with a contamination issue already, and we have another property that some people believe has a contamination issue that we just bought a few years ago. And I've been told by numerous city council members, do not get any more land with contamination issues, so I'm not gonna be
They're a
the one
good
that
thing to
says
do.
we're gonna waive this, so.
They're a,
I think we have a person in the audience that would agree with that.
We close public testimony, by the way.
Okay, so what, let me try to get us off of this dime.
Well, I think we
On
got
the
that
next
one rounded
order.
up.
Yeah, it would be a kind of a prioritized condition that would, the first option we want pursued is that it would be dedicated to the city. And that, you know, barring that it can't be done reasonably, then it would be going to the second one, which is platting it. And I'm putting words into our, just kind of wrapping things up.
With the easement?
With, yeah, it would have to have, would the easement have to be there if it's just plotted as
75.
conservatory?
conservation easement would go over the area, but the lots would still be, according to their proposal, the lots would still be platted into that area.
So the lots would be platted to 7,500?
No, the entire.
To the
Entire-
See, now, and I thought what I heard earlier from staff is that that doesn't work, that it's not
That-
possible to protect.
That's,
They didn't say,
Well, I mean,
well,
that's the basis.
Policing
that's
it's
the
not
basis
easy.
for-
policing it is.
That's the
yeah.
basis for the HOA tract
That's what I heard.
provision,
Right.
That's what I
to
heard.
eliminate
Right.
that.
You know, so just, but we're saying, we're okay with going across with those three being 7,500 square feet. That's just
Right.
giving
Right.
them a little bit of
Right.
land over the edge, but not very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm okay
'cause
with it.
It's
Yeah.
not unusual to have a lot on the fish. part of
Just a
it.
couple points of clarification so that, because this will be a rather complex condition to write up, which we will have you review.
Yes.
And probably David as well.
Which you can do tomorrow, by the way, before you forget.
So if the dedication to the city was to occur, they would maintain the lots at 7,500 square feet
That's
Yeah,
in the
those-
remaining area, okay.
Yeah.
And then,
Those 3 lots.
are you wanting to put on a stipulation or something? Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but, so, to go to option B, the platted with a conservation easement, is that at the applicant's discretion, it sounds like? Or is that if there's something that can't be met with the property transaction occurring?
No, we want the city to have it.
Well, yeah, I don't even think, I don't know how to word this. I don't think we want to look at B
Yeah,
and say there's a what if. We want to get this to go to the city,
yeah.
all right? And figure out the verbiage to
Yeah.
get that done. I think if we throw in, if we can't do this, we go to B.
Well, they go to B, that basic, it's platted, not 7,500 foot, it's platted the way that they have it.
Yeah.
It's platted. The question is what verbiage you have in the conservation easement.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, what triggers the option for them to go to B? Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm saying no B.
Yeah.
I think if there's no B, then, I hate to say this, but I think it's in everybody's best interest, including the cities, that condition get fleshed out more. There's discussion had about how that would work, because if you just basically say tonight, it's effectively one condition, it involves dedication to the city under these general terms, that's what we got, and we don't really know right now whether that's
Doable.
viable.
Well, can we have a kind of flush?
For either party. I mean, it's for the applicant because of the reasons that they've stated, and then on the city side, I don't know what, is it gonna be contingent upon the city manager maybe saying we don't need a phase one here? Or if he says there's a phase one, then does the applicant and the city get into a discussion about who pays for that or not? You know, I mean, there's just a lot of contingencies there that I don't think.
Can we have a continuance where we go off for a set period of time to try to flush that out and then come back? I mean, I'm not trying to drag this out.
That probably affects the clock, doesn't it?
Well, it would if we, yeah, I mean, again, this is not any sort of like window dressing for another
Yeah.
continuance. I'm just saying reality
that's-
being that if that's the way we went, we just had it as one condition, I think that's problematic.
Okay.
Or could be. Yes, a continuance would be a way to flesh that out.
Yeah, but they want to get going on the project
Exactly,
too,
that's what
I
I'm saying.
assume.
I don't, I'm certainly not trying to, this is not
Yeah.
to result in any sort of
Yeah.
direction, it's just the reality.
No, and it wasn't on me either. So my only point is if the city manager, the city council doesn't decide to waive the phase one, would that be a reason to trigger B? Or does it have to be in addition to that? That's what I'm trying to get at.
My thought is that what would trigger B is the impossibility of A. And requiring the phase one is not an impossibility. That's my take on it, that they would even, somebody's gonna have to pay for it, but it's not an impossibility. The impossibility would be something from as you were mentioning about the county surveyor that just says, there's just no way you can do this with what you got. And
They'll allow with an easement.
yeah, see, it
Yeah.
doesn't
They'll
sound
allow.
like that's a thing. So, that's my thought, is the only way, because I think there's consensus here that our priority is to see it go to the city.
Yeah, I think it's too difficult to set expected limits to go to the second option tonight, because we don't know all the details in it. But I agree, I concur with you, Chair, that I think that the reasonableness of it is that they'll be able to get it done. But using that as an expectation, if it becomes impossible, then I guess the only question would be is if option B is complete platting of the lots, are we okay with that?
Yeah.
and
Well, yeah,
guess
I mean,
my-
it's what's in the conservation easement. I mean, they're going to plat the lots. It's the conservation easement that's the discussion, like.
So I guess my confusion is, when I look at 2019,
Excuse me.
the majority of those lots, as they're shown here, is in the fish overlay. So those aren't really buildable spaces, right? I mean,
Right,
so I
right.
guess what I'm confused about is
The lots are
Well,
buildable.
the lots are, the front
The
of
lots
the
are
lots are
buildable on the
Lots
south
are.
end.
It's just
Yeah.
this
property.
backs
Yeah.
Yeah.
places.
it's
And
just
so then we
woods.
get back to that same problem with people not knowing where their
Encroachment.
property. Right,
Right.
that's so if we're gonna
Well,
allow development that goes this close to FSH,
Well, the problem is,
it's
they
gonna
know,
be there
the
no
problem is
matter
they
what.
know where their property line is, but it's like, that is my property.
right,
And I'm gonna go back there and do
Right,
what
do
I
what I
want, but
want.
it's
Right.
really not your property.
Right.
Okay?
exactly, well,
so-
that's
It's
exactly
just
it.
bird
Right, so
Yeah.
the thing is if we go to option B on that one, then we're back into Emily and whoever else trying to do the code
Exactly.
enforcement. So that's what,
That's why B's not a good,
and I don't wanna
No,
speak for
it's
the
not a good
developer.
idea. The fact the city incurs a cost doesn't mean we don't allow a builder to do it. He has a right to develop his lot, okay?
Mhm.
We want to minimize any potential impacts that are there. We can do that if the city can acquire the land,
Correct.
okay? Now, if they can't, you still can't stop him from
Building his
developing
lot.
his lot. The fact the landowner doesn't know where his property line is, those are all personnel problems. That's all individual stuff, right? You just have to put, that's why I keep saying, what's important is then what you put in the conservation easement, because the lots are gonna look like that. So what's in the conservation easement to try and minimize the likelihood or the effects of those things that we all think are gonna happen? Because to tell the applicant he can't develop his lots is the taking, and I don't think the city can do that. As they've said, they're going by the existing code. Existing code says they can do exactly that.
staff thoughts,
Agree.
comments?
So, yeah,
So do you wanna give, I guess, are we giving two options or what's the?
That's what I heard. I mean, I think that, you
Well,
know,
I think-
but I think on this level, the assessment here thing is, here's what I think the city needs to keep the objective in mind. You know, yeah, they said don't to get any more land that has a hazardous waste dump under it. Okay, that's your major, oh crap, right? As opposed to I found 3 noxious weeds here. You know, the point is that if the city wants a piece of land that's got a complete bill of health, 100%, you know, that's a cost to the applicant or whatever, and that's a panacea. But the question is, you want the land. So what's the big thing you want to make sure? That you don't have an oil dump underneath it or something that's going to cost you a lot. The fact you have 3 noxious weeds that are out there,
Yeah, it doesn't look at that.
Shouldn't
It looks-
prevent
it looks
us
at,
from
like-
doing something that's gonna develop, the city. I'm talking about the win-win part as opposed to, being in right, wrong, and then get to a cost that the applicant can't afford. The next thing you know, you're up to this.
Well, because if we put A and B out there, I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I am going to. I'd go for B, because it's kind of the best of both
Right.
worlds, okay? Is I get it, have the anyway, I think it's the best of both worlds
Yes.
on it. So I'm trying to get it, again, that, back to A. That's why I don't like having B so much on the table.
Right.
Yeah, because it's hard to define how you don't choose A and go to B if you don't have a line in that sand to say, if it
Well, that's
doesn't
what I
work
said,
out.
it was
this
the
way.
impossibility.
Well, if you
of how do
did, if
do
you did
that?
A and didn't put B in, and if A didn't work out, we'd be back having another hearing. That's what it boils down to, right, David?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess the concern I have about A is that the applicant is on record having concerns regarding the constitutionality of A, which are I'm not going to say I completely agree with the analysis, but are legitimate concerns in terms of what a city needs to do before it can compel dedication of property. There are tests and standards that have to be met with that. So if we just have a condition that says that, and we haven't really, where I've seen this work in the past, and we don't worry about the constitutionality issues, is when you have agreement between the property owner and the city. And I don't mean just Sandy, I mean everybody. When you're dealing with basically an exaction where you're saying you give us some land, and that becomes the city's land. That's either done 90% of the time with agreement between the local jurisdiction and the property owner, or alternatively, the local jurisdiction has a really good basis and has findings to support that exaction when the property owner might not agree.
And I want to make clear, when I was talking about A, I had, the word compel wasn't in there, it was that we both had mutual agreement, this was in both of our best interests to go this route.
And
Yeah, so
but I guess that's what I'm saying is, and I hate to be
No,
the party pooper here. I just don't think that the parties are at that point right now.
okay.
No.
I think they've expressed a desire about how it could work. We're talking about some ideas of how it could work, but there's still a lot of mechanics there that who's going to pay for the phase one if it's required? I mean, they don't want to pay for that. I don't know that the city would. And so if all you have is a condition that says, something along the lines of dedicate the property unless waived by the city manager, this phase one, city manager doesn't waive it, well, they have to comply with that condition somehow. I'm just talking practical realities based on what I've heard tonight.
Well, maybe we put option A that we talked about, then option B is off, and we pull back C with the HOA and make A even more attractive. I don't know.
I think at the end of the day, the applicant can say, I don't want to give it, I don't even want to give it back to the city. And they're going to come to us and say, code says I can do that. The question is, how do I do it? And if we turn them down, they just appeal it to council. Because the bottom line is, there's nothing to stop them from plotting those last plat the way they are. All right? The question is, how do you go about meeting the objectives in that fish area? And then you just, you build a conservation easement, and you build, for the trees and the trail, and you put it in there. So, it's gonna happen either way.
Maybe owned, preserved,
Okay.
by any.
So I don't see any
following
problem with the
mechanisms or
or,
obligations, doesn't say
if
the
two people are shaking hands and saying, if we can make this work, we will. Because if the dedication to the city doesn't work, B is gonna happen. If it's
Yeah,
either
that's a good
happens
point.
tonight, or we're gonna be back here at another hearing, and that's the only thing that'll be on the table.
Yeah, I didn't know.
And we'd be talking about an HOA or that, and we've already thrown out the HOA, so what are we talking about?
When I
There are
watched
two
the video,
options.
when I watched the video from February, I didn't realize that this was an option. And when I reviewed their April 3rd document, I concurred with them initially to delete this because the code doesn't say they can't do it. So I believe we should allow them to do it. But hearing that they're willing to, that I thought they were saying they were willing to give the land if the cost was reduced for that, or the stipulations reduced, I think it's advantageous for us to go after that because it's in the best interest of the space and the community that's to be built there for future ownership, so.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason we're having this hearing right now is they asked for 3 variances, which everybody agrees to give them. If they didn't have those 3 variances, we wouldn't even be here talking about this. They
Yeah,
would
you
be
probably-
arguing about something, and then you might be back to us,
You
but it wouldn't be over the variance.
Because the city, in that section, says there's 4 ways to accomplish a dedication, common ownership by an HOA, dedication of development rights with a, with the conservation easement, or there's one more. So the city would have recommended or required with the director's review, the HOA or the dedication. They would have appealed it. You would have been the appeal body, so it'd probably be before you anyways.
Anyway, here we are.
Well, that's my point, and I don't want to be back here again, so I think the or is fine.
I do, after listening to Chris and your statements, I think the order, A or B. No? Trying to look
Yeah,
for
no,
us.
I don't know that you got any other option
I-
really tonight. I think you have to do it
Yeah,
that
I
way.
think so too. I mean,
Yeah.
we're getting rid of B, I think then it's just like not very flexible for anybody.
Because
Yeah.
it really comes back, I mean, put back on the city is if you want this, then you'll figure out how to figure out the cost side of it. Assuming that the property is clear of tires or toxic dump or,
I mean, we can walk
Whatever.
through there, we can all walk through there with a 6-pack of beer and get it figured out and bring the cans out. You can bring the popcorn, right?
there you go.
I just, I don't know, I don't know.
Go.
Do you want my take on it a little
Yes.
bit?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, we don't want to deny subdivisions and deny development. The council's very pro-growth. At the same time, I think for the most part, development should pay for itself. And to me, on a 31-lot subdivision, where they're claiming lots are going for 130,000 north, they said that at the last hearing. A phase 1 environmental assessment, if it costs 10 or 15,000, 25, 30,000, spread over 31 lots, is that a burden to development occurring or not? So that's how I kind of look at it. I don't think it's really, if the city does acquire that land or get that land through dedication, if it benefits the overall trail system in the future, great. But I don't think that putting that cost burden on people in other subdivisions where they might have paid for phase 1 environmental assessments for land dedication is fair either. So you're saying if the city really wants this land, they should figure out a way to pay for it. In the past, my understanding is that we required the phase 1 before we took the dedication for the most part. And to me, to not require it in this case, you're basically saying this developer doesn't need to pay for that, but the taxpayers have to figure out a way to fund that. And to me, that's not really equitable.
Well, let's
I'm
just make it what it is and let the city manager make that decision. In other words, the city management council can decide how they want to make that work. We just need to get A and B done.
It's really not, and it's really not.
Who
paying
pays for it, it's up to them.
But it's not paying for the cost of the land, because if you take your numbers and divide it out, they're gifting, it's really the cost of, I understand it, to have the site approved, that it's free of, right? So we're not paying the true cost of that property that's in there,
Oh, sure, right.
right?
Right.
Well, we're just throwing around like the city was buying it. It's to make sure that it's free of environmental problems, et cetera. So, and there is a cost there, but it's a lot different than paying for the outright cost of the land, if we
Yeah.
divide that up.
Because it could just as easily be argued that the city would be buying property for $10,000, $12,000, or something like that. The property that benefits the whole city because of where it's at and on a trail system and so forth. So, you could argue both ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's just how you want to characterize it.
Mhm.
But again, I think the way we said it is for them to work on it.
Yeah,
I know
you're right, Don.
you already said that director level, you're probably not going to make some of the decisions. You'll be with the city manager under council. So let them work that out. And if they can't work it out, then it goes to B. And
Yeah,
the
I think
question
that's
is,
the important
do we
thing,
need
that
to
we
talk
state
about what's in
A
that
is-
conservation easement, Kelly, or is that pretty standard stuff that you know?
I'd like to go out there that we let Jerry work with staff to flesh out the wording of A and B. I mean, I would be happy to do it as well, with the applicant to get that to a point that is agreeable. And we could try to wordsmith it tonight, but I'm not sure we really do it justice. I feel that we're now in agreement on terms of the intent.
Mhm.
And then try to move across, there's a couple other ones that are key so we can wrap up the whole package tonight.
I mean, what I would recommend doing is we would draft something, have David review it, send it over to the applicant. They would take a look at it. If they had modifications, then we'd send it back to David, and then we would give it to you. That's what I would recommend.
Okay,
Makes sense.
write that down. That's the first part of Warren's motion.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then remember that.
I mean, that's how I would do it.
okay, that's part one of the motion.
Yeah, make a note, that's part one of the motion. Now let's go to the tree protection zone to get it solved. Because what if there's something to solve?
Which numbers were those? You want to cover the simple ones like the ADA ramp?
Yeah, sure.
ADA
I
ramp?
think we should go with the recommendations of our city staff,
Yeah,
people that are professionals at that.
I agree. We don't take the recommendations of our staff. What do we have?
Yeah. So,
Okay. Any other?
I concur.
comments?
concur.
Okay.
I'm along.
Those were like, I think 21 was that one. And I'm sure, Emily, you'll, with what we just discussed on the property, all the references to homeowner, HOA will go away and all that, so we don't need to.
Probably revert back to the original staff report,
Oh, okay.
with the exception of figuring out the phase one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the ramp's in.
The next one they had a question on was the number 5 on Tracy's list, which is identifying an additional 6 retention trees. So and the main reason for that is 5 of the 6 are kind of on the boundary, but it's on their property. So, I mean, I personally feel like what they've done is fine, that they got plenty of trees down there. And I worry about 30006. If it's on the line, it's on the line. Who cares? There's 63 trees down there.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. Do we need to make a note, I think, that we had talked about allowing them to square off
yeah.
That
If they square off, we're
9,700
gonna lose some of
21.
those trees, but.
I don't know if
No,
that
still in the
has,
conservation zone.
Yeah, they're still in the FSH,
Yeah.
so they would have to
Right.
apply for a permit and they would
Oh,
only
okay.
be
Nothing
Okay.
changes.
two
Right.
per year.
Changes. Got it.
But yes,
Thank
it's
they
just,
remove trees.
it's just
Got
a
it.
way of resizing those lots.
Got it.
Okay.
You're on the roll.
Is that consensus on 5 then? Just so we're,
I was going through the things they were
Looking
concerned
at the
about.
other
On number
list of
5, my suggestion was that condition not be in there, that they got plenty of trees, not we're gonna worry about 6
Wait.
more
I don't know that
trees.
it's plenty. I mean, it's required 29 and there's 33. So that's, I mean, that meets it, given that we've got these ones along the thing. But where you're acting like that's, you're saying that that's,
What they were saying was, these trees are on the line. If they put even the tree protection zone around, it's gonna be on the neighbor's property, which they
Right.
can't control.
right, so there's
And
6
the-
trees
and
they
the
can't
neighbors here and
promise.
said, I
And
mean,
they're
they're
only
way down
FSA.
over the hill.
Yeah,
You know, they're
that's
risk-
right,
They're on
that's
the
right.
protection zone.
Right.
If
Get
that
in here.
goes, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see a reason to spend any more time worrying
Yeah,
about those.
okay.
So 5, my suggestion is 5 not be there as a condition.
Which is
That's 5 on their list.
5 on their
Right.
list.
I would tend to go with their list, because that's what's important to them.
That's the big issue.
Yeah, well, at least that
Find the
gets their stuff, and then
corresponding
we have
one
ours.
in the staff list.
I agreed with their summary, because all they really were referring to in that section is eliminating the 5 feet beyond the drip line and going to a 10-foot from the trunk. And when we excluded section C, that got rid of that
Right.
annexation of it, so it moved over.
And the number 6 on their list was the third-party arborist to look at 4 trees. I mean, if those 4 trees were not viable, they have 33 and they need 29. If you threw all 4 of those out, they still have 29. So it's kind of an academic exercise as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I only wrote one question in that too, and I think it was answered already. My question I wrote before the meeting was, if those 2 trees are being removed, don't they have to replant 1.5-inch trees per the other code? in
Only
that
if they
section?
don't meet the requirement.
Right. So I thought it's going to replenish it anyway, even if they needed to.
Mhm.
They don't have to replant unless it takes them below the minimum requirement, then they gotta replant based on certain requirements.
They were just teeter-tottering on that, because they had 33, and then if they took those 2 trees out, then they took those
Four.
other
We're
2
talking
trees
4
out.
trees.
Now you're
Yeah,
right
these
at
are
the
4.
cusp, but if you have any other problems, and that's including 3006, which was on a common line, so do you include that tree or not include that tree? So all of a sudden, you're at the threshold of 28 or 29, and so I felt it just to
Right.
make sure that it was, even if those 2 trees that were on, in the FSH area, if those got damaged from when they were digging, that they would still go back and replant 2 more trees to help.
They already
the
got
trees.
30 additional trees down there,
They're
they're just not
Those
11
don't
They're
meet-
inches,
just not big enough.
Yeah,
right.
those don't.
which
meet
gets
the
back to the
code.
C part. So, I mean, it's like, we got trees coming out of our ears on this place. It's just they're not 11 inches, and by the time they get ready to do the subdivision, some of those others are gonna be 11 inches, because we're gonna be here
Yeah,
for.
by the time we get out of this meeting,
Yeah.
they'll be 11
So where we,
inches.
what number was that? And where are
Well,
we?
I just don't see any reason to inventory the 4 particularly, and then additional cost for third-party arborists to come out and look at 4 trees.
I didn't see any
That's-
need to do it either.
I don't
Yeah,
either.
that's-
So
Okay.
is that a consensus?
Yeah,
Yes.
Low?
Then there are
I'm
other
not-
recommendations,
Well,
we've already
Hang on,
talked
hang on,
about.
Hollis is.
yeah, I'm, when you keep saying that there's 63 trees, we really are close to the edge, like Chris had said.
33 at 11, but then there's
Yeah.
another 30 that are below that 11
Right.
threshold that
Right,
are inclusive because the code was, because we admitted it. So
okay,
it's,
That's why.
okay.
I mean, all these
That's
trees
what I was
over here
getting
that are
hung up
blue
on.
are ones that
Mhm.
are there, but they're just not on, that's not part of their magic 29, or 33. All the blue trees are up.
It's not magic,
They don't.
but okay.
They don't meet our retention standards, all of them. They're not all
That's
good
what I was
condition.
saying, they don't meet the retention
Right, so they're-
standards, and it's our
Not
job
just
as a
as a size.
body
They're
to make
non-
sure that the things are followed. So if the retention standards, that's our job.
And
part of our job.
Ryko really, part of our job is to look in the future, the pretty short future, to say those 30 trees, as outlined, are going to be in the or they're going to meet it very soon. And if we can preserve that whole area for the rest of the
Yeah.
community,
Right,
No,
That's-
they're not
that's a
all
big
viable.
picture.
they're not all viable.
Yeah, they're
yeah,
not bad.
and
They're not, but we have, that's
Are
my
there-
point.
are there a
I used to
handful?
replay
Yeah.
Ron's point, is
Yeah.
keep the big picture in mind.
yeah, they're 5 or 6.
There's nothing magic about
That's,
11
There it
inches.
that's all you need.
Yeah, but
There's
Except
nothing
it's
magic
our
about
code.
10 inches
It's
or
our
12
code.
inches,
there is some
right?
magic, Don.
Yeah, so the point is,
There is some magic, actually.
there's nothing magic about 11 that says they ain't better than any others, and
But
we're
it's the
here to
code,
make
Ron.
a,
But
get
it's
things
the-
taken care
it's
of.
the
and
code,
all
that's the
60 trees
thing.
down there.
it's the code, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a legal number we're bound to.
So somebody decided that made sense
Yes,
back
Yeah.
when they passed the code. For whatever, better or good. I mean, that's what you
Yeah.
got. 11 inches
Yeah.
is the standard. So, yeah, I mean, you do have to hew to that.
Somebody wanted 10, somebody wanted 12.
Right.
That was it.
They ended it at,
so arborist
So
consensus?
the point is if you go below the 29, then you guys are doing a tree variance.
right.
mm-hmm.
So is that what
Right.
you're granting by
No, I
saying
don't wanna
there's
do-
60-something trees?
Yeah,
And if you are, then by the code, you're supposed to do mitigation trees. So that's what
Yeah.
we're saying.
yeah.
There are some hard numbers that you have to follow, and if you don't follow them, then you're granting, if you want to, you can, but then you're granting a tree variance, so.
So, I mean, if A happens, then then a lot of these trees they're gonna be, it's kind of a moot point, right?
If
A or B
B
is the same thing for trees,
Okay,
Yeah.
for the same.
same thing,
They're not gonna-
doesn't change.
Oh, got it.
I'm not gonna cut. But, so they only need 33 trees is what's required.
They
29.
need
29.
29, and there's 33. However,
So we've got 4 in question.
So I guess my question to clarify is hiring an additional arborist to come in and do more measuring going to save us 4 more trees? Or are there 4 other trees that they can self-select
yeah,
that would,
Apparently
Quantified
not,
it.
because they picked all the ones that are 11 inch or greater.
I mean,
That's
to
what we have.
to kind of expedite
So-
this, what we could do is when we've done this with other we just did it with Marshall Ridge, which I believe Ray worked on. You guys worked on that, right? So we did say if, you have to meet the 29. If you go down below 29, then you can count 2 trees in good condition that are between 8 and 11 inches to make up for the 1 removed tree. And then,
Okay.
so we just did that in another subdivision. We could follow some similar logic to that.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So, yeah, so, yeah.
That sounds
And
good.
that would
sounds
eliminate the
reasonable.
need for the
Done.
third-party arborist.
Wish we, yeah. Where were you?
So they are hurting. They're not. You can trade 2 for 1.
I mean, I'm not saying that's good precedence or bad
No.
precedence or whatever, but that, you guys
Right.
did allow that in another one.
I
Now,
think
if you
that,
did allow that,
I think it
that'd
makes
be
a
tree
lot of
variance,
common
but-
sense, and thanks for doing that, because that, you know, we're talking about being business friendly, developer friendly. Like you say, let's
We want to be
objective
developer
in mind.
friendly, and we also want to protect,
Follow the code.
follow the code.
Okay, whatever.
What were other issues? I'm just looking down through the long list of conditions. that-
Well, on their list, there's only, I think we got them all figured out, as long as they understand the difference between the 3 years and the 2 years in that one.
Tracy is
they had
nodding
those
yes.
They had those 4 more, they had 4 more things on there.
Well, they had some stuff, but I don't think we covered. One's a conservation easement versus a pedestrian easement, and we had that, already talked about that.
I think we covered the maintenance access.
I think
easement,
one of them that they talk about on number 3 on their last page, and I found, just probably should be clear, is this whole concept of protection zone, because the urban forestry says 5 feet from the trunk, right?
10 feet.
10
10
feet.
feet?
10
Yeah,
feet,
10
and now they're
excuse me.
starting to.
But see,
beyond.
10 feet regardless of diameter, all right? And we've all learned that variable. So their arborist in his second report to us makes a lot of sense to me, and he acknowledges the fact that it should be a variable. He says at least the drip line, you know, it goes 5 feet outside the drip line, right? And then he says variable, yeah, and which I think that's something the committee ought to be thinking about a little bit. You start putting hard numbers like 10 down, and you're putting a 10-foot ring around a tree that big.
I think we're gonna be looking at the
Yeah.
science.
So,
that's
so
current.
the point is they, you know, I thought his suggestion was fine. But the point is that we'll buy the code, and so we said the urban forestry is what applies. It's 10 feet around the base. And is that what we're saying? That's what we're gonna get here? 10 feet around the base? Is that what we want? Or is it gonna be 10 feet outside the drip line?
I believe
Are they gonna
applicant-
volunteer to
I
do
believe
10 feet
the
outside the
applicant-
drip line?
Didn't the applicant
On the
say
front.
that they would go by the
10 feet from the
arborist's root protection zone?
Oh, yeah, I know that's what they said
Yeah.
they wanted to do, but that's, we'd have to make that a condition. I mean, because that's against the code.
No.
The code
Well, you
says
could-
10 feet.
But it's better than what the code is
I know.
based on what we
Well, that's my
interpreted.
point. We have to
Yeah.
recognize
You
that.
could say it, you could say that it would follow the code unless the arborist's root protection zone was
Greater
afforded
than.
greater
Greater than.
protection for the, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
that would allow that. It's gonna be, the code says at least, right, it's gonna be at least 10 feet unless the arborist says, well, wait a minute, for this particular tree,
It should be more.
it's gonna be
Yeah,
greater.
and I agree. I mean, it sounded to me like his feet were in the right spot.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay.
So I mean, I just wanted to clarify that up.
check.
The other one I wanted to clarify, nobody talked about yet, and maybe this isn't an issue, but I was reading Mike Walker's comments about the diameter of the cul-de-sac. It seemed like a random number generator. I found 38, they have 39, then they said the state code was 46, and then they agreed on 42. I mean, Mike says in his thing, they agreed on 42, but in theirs, they say 39. Is there an issue on the diameter of the cul-de-sac that needs to be resolved?
I mean,
Did-
Are we okay?
With the fire department, I
Okay
think
with
is,
what Mike came up with the 42.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, the thing, son, is we had the problem before with the curb cuts and the, are we gonna have enough parking spots for the one on-site parking?
We proved we had enough of the smaller cul-de-sac, so this one's bigger, so,
That'll give
Okay,
you
you,
more linear foot,
I think we're
Thank you.
good on that one.
yeah.
one of the easy ones.
thank you,
I went through my list of big things.
you did good.
Got any more big things?
Nope, I got one line.
Well, let's do the easy part in the 3 variances. Have the front door and the houses along Jacoby Road face the interior street.
Yep.
yeah.
Sure.
No. But you guys overruled me. I'm just going back and I can't remember. We just did a subdivision. I have to look at the map.
Yeah.
Where we said they wanted the exact same thing and we said no.
Well,
No,
I
we
think
did some,
allowed-
we did some each way, I think. Was
We
it
did
one up
some
on,
each way, I
Made
thought.
them fancy up the,
was it up on
That's
Sandy
right.
Bluff? Up
There
there,
Yeah.
that little one? Yeah, there was some topography, there was a topography thing there.
Yeah,
We said yes on some and no on the other, and the reason we did was, it was, I mean, you're not gonna see it, it's way up
Yeah.
here. If you're on the road, you're not gonna see the front door anyway. The front door is gonna go into a cliff.
But there's still a couple that we went through that, and I'm just saying is, I'm okay with being outvoted or whatever on it. I'm just saying is, I think we gotta be clear on it. It's another piece of the code that we run into multiple times. I like having the door the way that they're asking for it. We've been, I think, not consistent in the way we've been interpreting it. So,
But wasn't there, I read somewhere, there's an agreement to put a decorative fence along Jacoby? Is that correct? Kinda like we did
I
over
didn't hear what you
Dealing.
said.
So, well, a
decorative
wrought
fence
iron, it's like a
along
black
Jacoby.
wrought iron fence, kinda like as along Timberline Trails,
Mm-hmm.
where we have it facing, DeBarco.
Yeah.
in lieu of the front yard, you have a nice decorative fence.
A decorative fence, we kinda put a little porch on their back
Right.
door to make it look like a fake front door, but the point is it made no sense for those things to open out on
Correct.
DeBarco because of the
Right.
slope.
right. I drove up Jacoby Saturday just to take a look at the property, and most of the houses on that end are all facing inward to
Yeah.
the street. They're not facing towards Jacoby. So that's why I was saying, I agree with what they're saying, so.
Okay, the next one is to provide one-tiered lot configuration rather than a two-tiered lot along Jacoby. Any problems?
I had no issue.
Okay. And the third one, well, block length for the Woodstock between Camden Court and the east property.
No issue.
Perfectly
Good.
fine.
Okay,
That's fine.
that was the easy part. What are we forgetting and overlooking that's gonna be a gotcha?
The only thing is, our motion would involve adopting all of the conditions. I mean, there's
Yes.
all of those things in bold.
It would be, the motion would be approving the conditions that have not been altered by our discussion. Because
Yeah,
a
that
bunch
are,
of them are
yeah,
gonna,
that are in bold and or summarized by staff.
The only other one I had that Tracy pointed out that I think we should just clarify, just because I don't want it to be like, after we write up the order of confusion.
right,
I think that's what you're looking for, right?
yeah, the
Yes.
gotchas. Yeah.
So on his, on page 4, he did point out that there's, and Emily, I think, gave some clarity to this, but we're recommending a 3-year maintenance if they choose the bond, which, like Emily said, they probably won't do this. But just so it's consistent in the final order, we had said it would be a 3-year maintenance for street trees and then a 2-year maintenance. Do you just want it to all be 2 years, or do you want it to be the 3 and the 2? I mean, what do you want there?
Well,
What do
the
you
2
want?
refers to landscaping other than trees.
Yeah.
What does the city want?
What's gonna,
I mean,
what's
we
gonna
wanted
help
the
the
3
trees
and 2,
survive?
but at the same time, I don't want to get hung up on this because, as Emily pointed out, it's like a 99% chance they won't go with bonding all the improvements. I don't think they would probably, yeah. So I think just for moving this thing along, I would be
Yeah.
fine. Even though Emily's correct, we need 3 years for trees. I think
Yeah.
2 years in this instance would be fine because I don't think it's even going to be an issue at all.
2 and 2?
Yeah, just to move it along and be done with it.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
10 o'clock.
agree with that one. Do you think, have we covered them all?
I don't know. Just give me 1 second. I know that one was popping out in my head. I was looking
Well,
at
the
Tracy's
only other
list
issue
here.
that Ray brought up that hasn't really been discussed, but I know he's got his stuff here, was the terminus. You know, the terminus, they were wanted to terminate the street short, and they kind of have a grade.
Right,
where the city
because of
engineer
it.
set a wall, so if we're going with city engineer's recommendation, it would be, as he recommended, it's not like a big concrete wall, it could be a dirt one. But I read Mike's comments, it sounded fine to me to.
That's
be
what I
more-
read too during the staff report.
Yeah,
Mike handed that to me about an hour before, and I think they've discussed it, so.
okay, so if that's not an issue, then.
Okay,
That's all I know of. I mean, I would honestly just ask the applicant if they have any ones that are sticking out, because I'd rather get them resolved right now than.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that, was Tracy Brown, I didn't see that there was anything. I guess, going forward, we were hoping to see because there's a lot of changes to the conditions. I guess we were hoping, and particularly that one condition regarding the either or, we're hoping to, if possible, see all the conditions prior to them being issued. I mean, we don't disagree with the changes, but there's, you know, there's a lot of.
That's what we had said.
Oh, you did say that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
said exactly that,
Okay.
work it up, and David would look it over
And send it to you.
send it to you,
Okay.
and then our folks will talk to
Yeah.
you.
But I was saying in addition to just that one condition, just
So
to
to have
make
them
sure
all
all
cleaned
of
up.
the
Yeah.
other little
Yeah.
items have been caught.
That
I
would-
think this one's so confusing, I think we'd send you the whole order, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody needs to close this.
I move we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing at 10:02 PM. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are closed. And I think we've already had enough of our discussion. Somebody got a motion crafted?
No,
Or do you wanna look at
you,
David?
Don.
Hey, I made it last time. I made the motion to continue.
You're really good at that.
It would be based on the conditions in the staff report that have been altered by our discussion. Is that sufficient, David?
Yeah, I think so. I think what I'd want to see you, yes, for all the conditions, especially given the fact that we're going to have a little bit of back and forth, I think something like that is just fine. I think it's important for the record to do two things, though, because they specifically applied for them. Approve the 3 variances. You don't even have to get into all the details. Just a motion to approve the 3 requested variances. A motion to, it's all be part of one motion. I move to approve the 3 requested variances, to interpret the code such that 17-102 applies to subdivisions, not 17-92-10C. Okay? And to impose conditions of approval consistent with the discussion you had this evening. Knowing that those conditions are going to be,
Wouldn't those be two different?
No, it's all one motion.
All one motion, got it.
doesn't have to be.
Yeah, well, why would we repeat the one on the code interpretation?
Did you vote on it?
Yeah. And we voted and approved it last
Before,
meeting.
yeah.
Oh, that's right. That was last time.
Yeah.
My bad.
It was just a clarification
Yeah, that's why.
that staff asked
Okay.
for.
Where's the number of this
No, it
baby?
doesn't matter.
18-025.
Clarification. I forgot they voted on it. If it's
I make the motion that we accept 18-025.
Sub var S tree.
Thank you. As presented.
The 3 variances.
We approve the 3 variances requested, and also to impose the conditions of approval as discussed during the hearing.
That works.
Okay, that works. We'll go for a roll
It's going
call
to be looked
vote.
at anyway.
Oh,
Wasn't pretty.
Did I get a second?
I second that motion.
All right, Chris got a
There
second.
you go. You got it on the record.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Carlton.
Yes.
Commissioner Lisowski.
Yippity-doo.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel.
Yes.
Commissioner Logan.
Yes.
Commissioner Meaton.
Yes.
And Chairman Crosby.
Yes, motion carries.
Who won the game?
Thank you.
Okay, I won't say anything. I won't say anything.
Okay, staff,
Yep. Thanks, Ray.
we're not, staff, anything
good morning.
further for us?
Yeah, I did pass out before the meeting this upcoming planning commission meetings list.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, the first one you can mark off since that was tonight. So later this month, we'll be hearing Dutch Brothers on April 22nd. May 28th, which I think I already got. I think I got everybody's input on this with the exception of maybe Chris.
That one is funny, the bird annexation. I have to
Yeah.
grant you.
So, yeah, this would be the day after Memorial Day, so it'd be on Tuesday, May 28th, and we'd have 2 items on there. And then in June, I think having 2 meetings is gonna be best. Both Stowaway Stall Storage and PG Line Center would both be very, I think, they're gonna each take 2+ hours, and I think having them in one night is gonna be very trying for everybody.
Yeah.
And I would honestly rather just have 2 meetings than to do like a 5-hour meeting.
Agreed.
Don, are you in town then?
I won't be here for the 10th.
I'm out of
June
town
10th.
on the 10th too.
So if we can't meet on the 10th, we can try to find a different date.
Well, I'll be here on the 10th. We have a quorum. Mike?
Yeah.
I don't know if
I'll be here.
Todd,
I'm in Boston.
I don't know if Todd worked on that one or not.
You need to find out if you have a quorum on the 10th, and then,
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I can make the 10th.
So
I can make all of those.
Would you chair it then? You'd chair it?
Yeah.
And then, Paul, do you make the 10th or?
I
do you
can
make-
make all of those.
Chris, do you make them?
I'm here on the 10th.
Okay, sounds like you'll-
Is Todd involved in anything on the 10th?
We'll have to look at that. So it sounds like we have a quorum, but we'll just double check, and I'll send all these dates out again. I just want to run it by you while we're all talking here. And then July, I have no idea yet. I'm gonna try to get you guys a month off sometime in the summer, but I don't know if it'll happen or not.
Hey, get the business
Yeah,
done.
get the bit, yeah, just, I think it's better
I mean,
to
we
go.
can package them together. I've just kind of learned that unless one of them's a smaller item, putting two big ones on at the same meeting is just,
Yeah,
it's too much.
really hard.
And you know, the other hard part is, James will be bringing both self-storage and MPG line center, so he would also have, it's not even like I can divide it up between two staff members for that one,
Yeah.
which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
So then
Where's
you're
this-
coming with two big items.
Where's that self-storage at?
Down in the hole,
Yeah.
like in the industrial hole.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
What is the Fun Time RV planning on doing?
It's fine, it's fine.
No,
Expanding the RV
we're
lot.
not adjourned.
Are they gonna, that lot to the
Oops.
east?
close.
I mean, we went through that once with them already.
Yeah.
That early day.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've re-looked at the code, and I don't know if our previous interpretation was correct on RV storage in the downtown.
Oh, they want to bring the.
So is that it? There's a variance for RV storage in downtown?
No, I think there's several variances to it.
Oh.
So toasted.
So, we'll take a look at the dates on these and, send them back out.
And you're telling me Duxbury is gonna be really quick, right? Drive-through?
yeah.
Drive-through and C1, huh?
They bring coffee for everybody.
Are you gonna bring coffee for everybody?
I'm not.
Maybe the applicant will try and bribe us.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else.
I don't have anything else.
All right. Let's hear the magic words.
Well, I do have one more,
Oh,
if I can, I'm sorry, I just had to get on my
you're gonna
calendar
leave
and
at
look.
10. You're 9 minutes
know.
after.
There's an invitation for a planning commission on Wednesday, May 29th from you. And
What day would that be?
it's
A
Wednesday.
That
After
shouldn't
Memorial
be.
Day.
It's after.
Probably a different time zone.
Should have been, he just did
Your,
28th.
Probably
Your
in, like,
Gmail
New
account
Zealand
might have
or
you in New Zealand time.
Yeah, you may be
Okay,
on
well,
New
it's not-
Zealand time like I was.
Well, I was trying
Always
to,
on New Zealand time.
it's at
Did they
1:30
ever get that
PM.
fixed?
So, okay.
Yeah,
I get
your
that.
IT
Is
guy
that-
got me, but I know.
Is that the May 28th meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just.
I bet
Okay.
you're on New Zealand
I just
time.
look at the calendar.
I'm not, you are, somebody is.
No, you have to actually set that in your Google Calendar.
Oh my
I bet
God.
you-
I know who it was. Somebody
Jeff.
sent me from your IT, straightened me out.
Okay.
Said,
So
go
if
to
you have
this.
issues with it, we'll give you the same information and you can fix
Now-
it.
I mean, I went to exactly what was there. Yep, it was set for New Zealand time.
You were
Okay.
just wishing you were in New Zealand or something.
I wanted to.
That's what I'm done, sorry.
Okay.
Then
Yeah, we
motion-
can help you figure it out if it doesn't work.
I move to close the meeting.
Yeah.
I second it.
been
Kelly,
moved and
on this lady who
seconded to
talked
adjourn.
about.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
On this lady who talked to manufactured housing, I mean, she came and talked to
Is it not
council
working
on the
anymore?
same thing. You were there.
So, but that's taken care of.